Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
My name is Emma Foster, and while the word chicken was traditionally used to describe husbands, I believe it's now just as fitting for wives. In today's world, women take on jobs that were once reserved exclusively for men. We even go to war alongside them. So why shouldn't we be considered chickens too when it fits? For thousands of years, women were homemakers, responsible for raising the children. Meanwhile, some of our husbands frequented brothels, had affairs with neighbors, or were habitual womanizers. Not all of them, of course, but there were enough to leave their mark on history. Given this perspective, I think the term chicken has become gender-neutral. And if that's the case, then I was definitely a chicken in my own right. I was born and raised in a middle-class family here in the Midwest, with an older brother. I attended the local high school during a time when women's soccer was still gaining traction in the U.S., but my school was a trailblazer in the sport. I joined the team and played as a defender, specializing in free kicks. I quickly gained a reputation for my powerful free kicks and penalty shots, scoring crucial goals when the team needed them most. After high school, I went on to college to study business administration. I continued playing soccer on the women's team, and my strong free kicks and penalties earned me a bit of a reputation. Goalkeepers definitely didn't like me, and I sometimes joined the forwards and midfield players, scoring powerful goals from way outside the box. The crowd loved it. Although I wasn't good enough to make it to the U.S. women's national soccer team, I thoroughly enjoyed the sport. During college, I dated a few guys but never found the right one. I was a tall, blue-eyed blonde with good grades to match my athletic skills. After college, I landed some solid job opportunities in my hometown, worked hard, and earned promotions and pay raises. It was during one of my business meetings that I met Kevin Brooks. He worked at a partner company, and we hit it off immediately. Kevin was handsome, charming, and we had undeniable chemistry. We started dating, and before long, we were in love. Kevin proposed, and I accepted with excitement. He was a tall, dark-haired, blue-eyed man who had been divorced. He told me that his first marriage hadn't worked out, and they had parted on good terms. His ex-wife had moved back to Alabama, and they didn't have any children. I didn't press for more information. He seemed trustworthy, and I had no reason to doubt him. We dated for a long time, and I never saw any red flags. Kevin seemed like the perfect match for me. We had a big wedding, surrounded by our parents, relatives, and friends. Together, we bought a beautiful home in the suburbs. We were very much in love, and our marriage was filled with passion. I eventually stopped taking the pill, and we were blessed with 2 sons. Our first, George, was named after Kevin's father, and a year later, we had Ed, named after my father. Even though I stayed home to raise the boys, our financial situation was solid. Kevin was promoted and eventually became the local CEO of his company. His hard work paid off, and we lived a comfortable life. Every summer, we alternated between vacations in Europe or tropical destinations, and life felt almost perfect. One day doing laundry, I noticed lipstick stains on one of Kevin's shirts. Ed was 5, and I felt my 7-year happy marriage was falling apart. I cried, dried my tears, and evaluated my options. Kevin was a good provider, and for the time being I decided on the chicken solution. It became clear to me after a time that not only was he a womanizer, he was a serial cheater husband. I came to know 2 of his lovers. Later I will tell you how that happened. In such circumstances, many marriages become a non-declared, or sometime a declared open marriage, but I did not look for extramarital activities. I lived for my children. The reason for this was very interesting. Before Kevin, I had dated a man who told a funny story to me when we broke up. He, Richard, told me his mom was a cheater, and he discovered this accidentally when his father was seriously ill and he attended college. But his mom did not know Richard was aware her cheating. His father was a strong smoker, and he got lung cancer. His father was clueless, and Richard did not want to reveal this secret to him because his dad's cheating wife, Richard's mom, looked after him well during his illness. Richard did not want to spoil his daddy's last days before his death. However, Richard did not like his mom, and he looked for a job far from her. She lived in Maryland. Richard told me he did not want an American wife like his mom was, so he looked for a wife in Asia. He found a Christian Indonesian girl, her name was Maria, who converted from Catholicism to Protestantism for Richard. Later, we were in the same church as them since they lived near us. Richard and Maria had 2 beautiful daughters, and my younger son married their younger daughter, and how strange life is. I know now that Richard and his Indonesian wife have been living a happy life since that, but Richard did not invite his mom to their wedding, and Richard's mom was not at the wedding of my son Ed and Ann. I did not want my sons to think of their mom as a hooker, like Richard thought of his own mom. I was a betrayed wife and a chicken for a long time. Other events also caused me to remain with my husband, the sad experiences in my distant family and among friends, schoolfellows. Such was the divorced life with children and the negative effects on the life of the children in the broken family. I did not want the difficulties of a broken family to impact my sons, so I remained married to Kevin. Kevin liked his sons, and he was a great dad at home. This was the second reason why I decided to stay. When Ed was 12 years old, I looked for a job and found one at a local company. I worked hard, and when Ed was 14 years old, I thought of divorcing. I gathered a little secret money, and I asked a PI firm to look at my husband. They found evidence of an affair between my husband and a colleague of his. The PI firm gave me a DVD with a video and some photos on it. They gave information about this woman and her family. She was Rachel Reed and her husband was Adam Reed, an engineer. They had 2 daughters. The younger was same age as Ed. I got photos of the husband and the children as well. However, at this time George was in trouble with his friends in high school, as they all had begun using dope. Kevin and I had to struggle with George to avoid the drug abuser life. The local police arrested the source, and we were lucky George did not become a drug addict. If I had begun the divorce, George would have become a drug abuser, I thought several times. Kevin broke up with Rachel, and he struggled for George as well. When George went to college, Kevin found a newer woman for himself. I had his affair investigated by the same PI firm that spring, which I used earlier. I had videos and photos on thumb drive and DVD. George went to college, and he wanted to be a lawyer. Ed began the last year in high school when I got an offer for a 1-week training in Calgary, Canada, in September from my boss. There would be a trip to Banff as a socializing program and the training on Tuesday, and I was very interested in the Rocky Mountains before wintertime. I went to the airport by cab and I flew to Calgary, Alberta on Saturday morning. The training began in a hotel on Sunday morning. Let's check the story from Adam's side. I'm Adam Reed, the youngest of 3 siblings. My sister is 8 years older than me, and my brother is 10 years older. Growing up, life wasn't easy. My dad worked hard with heavy machinery at a car junkyard, and my mom was a supermarket cashier, starting her job when I turned 12. Money was tight when we were kids, but things got a bit easier once my sister and brother moved out. My brother became a skilled welder, and my sister worked as a shop assistant. In high school, I excelled in subjects like math, physics, chemistry, and IT. During the summers, I worked for my father's boss at the car junkyard, earning pocket money by learning how to salvage useful spare parts from wrecked cars. That job gave me a lot of extra cash for the rest of the summer, and it was satisfying work. I was a tall, dark-haired, brown-eyed guy, and my teachers encouraged my parents to send me to college to study engineering. The family agreed, and I went on to pursue an engineering degree. I did so well in college that I earned a scholarship for my master's degree. Unlike most of my peers, I wasn't really into the usual social activities. While they were drinking beer, I preferred low-fat milk. After graduating, I landed a job at a local oil and gas mining machine factory, starting at the entry level in the workshop. Over time, I worked my way up to become a developing engineer. The job was perfect for me because it allowed me to be creative, designing specialized machines and tools for oil and gas mining companies. The real thrill, though, was the occasional need to travel to oil and gas rigs to solve urgent, complex problems on site. It was a demanding but exciting job, and I thrived on the challenges it brought. I dated girls at college, and when I graduated with master's degree, I found Rachel, who graduated in business administration. She was a brown-haired, green-eyed girl. We dated for a year, and I asked her to be my wife, and she told me yes. So we got married, and she moved with me to my city. We lived the average family life in our house in suburbia, and we had 2 beautiful daughters. My wife was at home with our daughters. Though I loved my wife, I still began to save a secret stash for emergencies she did not know about, and did not have access to when our younger daughter Grace was born 2 years after Nora's birth. I saved this secret stash for special circumstances, as I lived in such an environment where divorced people were more than the average. My decision to save money just for myself was rooted in my messy familial background. My parents lived a happy life, but their elder children had a lot of trouble. My 10-year older brother cheated on his wife, but they reconciled their relationship. Then my brother cheated again, and my sister-in-law divorced him with 2 children. She found a good man, and she married this man who divorced from his cheating wife with 3 children. His ex-wife lived with an abusive maggot who wanted to spoil his elder daughter, but the ex-wife called the police in time, and they arrested him. My brother remarried, and they had 2 children. My brother was a serial cheater, so his second wife divorced him too. A stepfather brought up these children again, but this stepfather did not marry the children's mother in order to get child support money from my brother. My brother moved to a small apartment and paid the child support for 2 children. He could meet his children at my parents' house only. My sister was a cheater too, but she got the custody for 2 small children, and she married a good man and they had a new child. My sister cheated on her second husband too, after which they reconciled, but when my sister cheated again, he divorced her. She remained alone and was despised by her 2 ex-husbands who did not forgive her. The 2 ex-husbands organized such schedule that they visited their children on alternate weekends, so my sister was either with 1 child or 2 children on the weekends. She could hardly date because of this time schedule. My friends were in similar situations with their divorces, and among my relatives, divorced people were clearly overrepresented, too. My best friend became a gambling abuser, and his wife went to her parents, her brother's family, and her parents-in-law on weekends to get meals for her children. We invited them several times for Sunday with the children, and Rachel cooked for them. His wife had enough of her husband's gambling abuse, so she divorced him and went to work. She found a divorced good guy later, who had 3 children by his ex-wife. One of my other friends' wives also cheated on him, and my friend divorced her with 2 small children. His ex got the children's custody, and he complained to me that he could rarely see his children. Among my and Rachel's distant relatives, there were many divorced parents, and later among Rachel's friends as well. The children lamented everywhere, from near and far, about their broken life. I thought it was important to own a secret deposit for a divorce or a family emergency, so I gathered 3% of my income. I thought I could surprise my wife with this found money after 35 years of successful married life. Rachel was at home with Grace and Nora. The sex was similar to that of other couples with children. We did it 3 times a week. We lived a happy life. I worked at a good company. I did creative work with good colleagues, and I had 2 beautiful daughters and a loving wife. I was happy. When Grace turned 12 years, Rachel went to work for a local company. She worked hard. She even worked overtime sometimes, and she praised her job. I heard of her boss, Kevin Brooks. Rachel told me her boss recommended promotions because she worked so well. I was totally clueless about her. When Grace was 15 years old, Rachel took me to her company's Christmas party. My company and her company parties had been at exactly the same time earlier, but this year my company's Christmas party was a week earlier. This was an exception, because the next year parties were on the same day again. Rachel took me in her car. I think she thought I would drink a little more, but she should have known that I preferred milk to beer, and the distilled alcoholic drinks did not attract me at all. I had taken her to my company's party, and she could see I did not drink a lot. We sat with a couple at a table. The husband worked at another department of my wife's company. We talked a little with them. When my wife went to the restroom, that colleague looked at me in a funny way. Later, I was introduced to Kevin Brooks, the boss of my wife. He told us he had to go home early to his ill wife. She had a bad temperature from the flu. We stayed a little longer. I got a problem with my stomach, and I had to go to the restroom. I sat on the toilet bowl when 2 male colleagues of my wife came to the restroom to piss. I heard one of them telling the other, "It's interesting that Rachel's clueless husband and her earlier lover boy Kevin met here. The love affair's been over for half a year. Kevin will look for a new woman meet soon, and he will transfer Rachel to another department," responded the other. "It would be funny if Rachel worked together with Kevin's earlier mistress, Martha Martinez," said the first, and they were laughing. Martha's husband was so clueless as Rachel's husband is now. "I don't want to tell them such bad news," said the second speaker. "Neither do I," said the first voice, and they laughed. They left the restroom. I was sitting on the toilet bowl, and I was crushed from the bad news. I thought of killing Kevin and Rachel, but I knew Kevin had gone home to his ill wife, and I abandoned this train of thought. I did not know how, but an idea came to my mind. When I thought of the overrepresented divorced relatives, friends, and their children, I decided I would divorce Rachel, but I would wait until Grace graduated from high school. I decided to become a chicken for 3.5 years. Naturally, if Rachel humiliated me, brought STDs, I would begin the divorce earlier than Grace's graduation. However, I thought of my secret stash, and I was glad that I had been so wise. I went back to our table, and I told my wife that I felt bad and had to go home. I thought Rachel was glad we went home quickly too. I did not pretend I was in bad state. I really was, but mostly from the discovered affair of Rachel. She made me a cuck. I hated her with all my heart, and the love became hate in my heart. Next day, I started the Oscar Award actors play for my daughter's sake only. Rachel's 2 colleagues were right, and Rachel was transferred to that department 2 months later, where Kevin Brooks's earlier mistress Martha Martinez worked. Rachel told me she liked her new job at the other department, but she was on bad terms with Martha only. She complained about Martha several times. I was secretly laughing at her. At my workplace, I ate lunch with a colleague from the IT department. Will Smith had a second wife with 3 children, and they lived a happy life. We discussed cheating wives. He told me his first wife was a cheater, and he was lucky because he discovered her cheating before any childbirth. He used secret video cameras, bugs, and he sent the sex videos to her parents, relatives, friends, acquaintances, and he published these videos on sex portals too. He told me his ex-wife found a serious relationship and they were planning the wedding when he sent the videos with a letter to her fiancé. The wedding was canceled. The ex-fiancé of his ex-wife thanked the videos and the letter to my colleague. The fiancé hired a PI firm and they gave him evidence that his soon-to-be wife had a lover again. I asked him if he could build a similar spy system in our house. He told me he could collect the files in a spare computer. I could look at it with a password, but I had to delete the old files. I praised my idea of my secret money because this activity was invisible financially. When my wife worked, my daughters were in high school. My colleague and I asked one day off from our jobs, and we built the video and other bug systems in our house. I checked the file monthly and deleted the old files. Nora went to college and Grace was in her last year of high school when I discovered something on the secret spy system. That time I was working on an oil rig to solve a difficult problem, and I had to work on weekends as well. The spy files showed that while I was away, Rachel became the sex teacher of an 18-year-old neighbor boy. Grace almost caught them. The boy had to jump out through the window. I discovered the sex teacher activity during my monthly file checking in the beginning of September. The following day, Wednesday, I had to travel to Calgary. In Canada, Alberta, there is a center of the oil and gas mining industry, and I had to meet our partner from oil and gas mining firm to solve some problems. In addition to this business travel, my boss sent me for a special symposium too. The environmental issue was a strong incentive to develop new mining methods. The new method was to use the drilling instruments to bring up metal compounds of or from the deep. Generally, the mining industry makes shafts and tunnels, and workers mine the ore and coal with mining machines from the deep. The symposium would start on Sunday morning in a hotel in Calgary. The social program was to be an all-day trip to Banff in the Rocky Mountains on Tuesday. The symposium would end on Saturday. As my boss told me, Adam, this would be a new important market possibility for our firm. I was full of anger with my wife, but I could suppress my hatred when I worked, so I went to Canada with a buried hate in my soul. Let's check the story from Emma's side. I was flying to Calgary, Canada, and I was thinking about my life. I lived with a serial cheater a-hole husband and I was a model wife and a model mother for 2 sons. My younger son Ed attended the last year in his high school. Would Kevin continue to be a good provider for me in the future, or would he replace me with his younger mistress? Such thoughts were circling in my mind in the plane, and I had a bad vision about my family. I did not like this chicken roll at all. I drew a conclusion about myself in my mind. As I had been an athlete earlier and I still had a strong need for exercise, we furnished the basement with fitness machines and I used them frequently. Sometimes I did jogging with my sons. My husband used other gyms instead of ours. Sometimes my sons used the fitness machines with me. I did not smoke or drink much and I slept enough, so my body was in good shape. I could deny 10 years from my age easily. The problem was the collection of the mate candidates. There were few good mate candidates in the market. Most good husband candidates were attached with girlfriends, mates, or wives. To find a good mate was a difficult thing. To find another divorced serial cheater, a violence abuser, an alcoholic abuser, a drug abuser, a gambling abuser was, however, so painfully easy. I was in a trap situation, without any simple solutions. I arrived at Calgary Airport and went by cab to the hotel where the training was to be held. I got surprised at the reception of the hotel. There were 2 tables with young college student girls who assisted the new arrivals. The first table was for the participants of a mining symposium, and the second table was for the participants of our training. The program firm organized 2 events for the same time in the hotel with the same timetable and socializing programs as well. The hotel had several bars, restaurants, and conference halls. The trip for the Rocky Mountains was common with the participants of the mining symposium. I got special vouchers for meals and soft drinks, but alcoholic drinks had to be paid from our pockets. I got a name badge and the girls told me I had to wear it in the hotel. I got the magnetic key of my room and I went to my floor. When I stepped out from the elevator with my suitcase, I was almost petrified from the shock. Adam Reed was about to enter the elevator. I could read his name badge, and he was definitely Adam Reed. He politely greeted me and went to the ground floor. I remembered him from the photos and videos of the PI firm, and he did not change with time. He was handsome, and he had a few gray hairs only. I occupied my room, took a shower, and went to have dinner in the restaurant of the hotel. I wore my name badge. I found Adam alone at a table. He was handsome and sad. I greeted him and asked whether I could sit next to him at the table. He agreed, so we introduced ourselves to each other. "We're from same city and I know you," I said to him. "Oh, do you?" He sounded genuinely astonished. My husband's name is Kevin Brooks. He's the CEO at the company of your wife. His pupils became very narrow. I felt the hate in the air. The waitress came to us to take our dinner vouchers, and she gave us the menu. We could choose from 3 types of dishes, and we asked for sparkling mineral water. I knew I had to be straight and brave. I felt I could be honest with him, so I said, I don't like them either, and neither did I like their affair. The hate disappeared from his eyes, and a funny confusion with a tinge of surprise appeared on his face. After a short hesitation, he asked me straight, Why do you live with him then? I'm a responsible mom for 2 sons, as you're for 2 daughters. When I said this sentence, I flushed, and I knew I felt more than simple sympathy for him. Earlier he was embarrassed, but now I was. He smiled at me and said, We're in the same boat with the same souls. I knew we had good chemistry. I smiled back at him. The waitress came back with the sparkling mineral water and asked us about our orders. We chose the same dish. We've got the same taste, too, Adam remarked. We laughed a lot. My husband was a dry man, but Adam had a good sense of humor, just like me. I knew I was in love with him, and I could not explain why, but I felt I could conquer him. We were talking about the interesting organization, because I came to the training, and he came to the mining symposium to the same hotel. He told me he would go to Edmonton on Monday and Tuesday after the symposium to solve some problems at an oil and gas company before coming back to our city. I told him I would go home on Sunday morning. Both of us were very excited about the trip to Banff and the Rocky Mountain next week. We ate our dinner and went to one of the bars. We talked about our children, and we showed our children's photos to each other, and we both knew we were proud of them. We laughed a lot. I felt he liked me. We went to our floor and arranged a meeting before the elevator at 8 o'clock in the morning. We would go to have breakfast together. My training and his symposium would begin at 9 o'clock. I went to my room, and my sex fantasy was connected with him. I did not feel guilty with such a serial cheater a-hole husband as Kevin and with Adam's wife Rachel. I thought he would be a good second chance for me. The following day, we met at the elevator, and we went to the restaurant where there was a buffet. Adam drank only milk. He told me he preferred milk to beer. I found this very interesting. We went to our respective programs, so I to the training and he to the mining symposium. We met at lunch too. We avoided the home problems, and we talked about our jobs. Adam's firm wanted new market possibilities for special or mining by drilling techniques, and the symposium dealt with this. After the afternoon sections, we met for dinner again. We were cheerful and we laughed a lot. I now know that both of us felt so free. We went to the bar to talk after dinner. There he began the serious issue. Dear Emma, I'm in such a mood that I want to give up my oath a year earlier. I vowed to myself I'd wait until the graduation of my younger daughter Grace before I start the divorce. I flushed from the happiness and the possibility of my secret dream coming true. I clouded him with my pheromone. He noted this. I was honest with him. I wanted to divorce him 3.5 years ago, I said. Adam looked at me in surprise. Why didn't you get through with it? He asked. My elder son had a problem with his schoolfellows with drug. Kevin broke up with your wife, Rachel, to help with our son, George. He was honestly astonished. Oh, I see. Did you succeed? Yes, in the end we did. And that's why I wanted to forgive Kevin. I thought I'd forgive him everything when we saved George, because he was with us. However, he's got a young mistress now. I used the same PI firm secondly. I've videos and photo files about your wife and my husband, and now I've evidence of his new young hooker too. He looked at me in a funny way and he said, I told you yesterday we're in the same boat. Are you afraid he'll replace you with her? I don't understand your husband. You could deny almost 10 years. Emma, you're a cheerful, lively woman. I flushed again. Thank you for your compliment. Yes, I'm not sure in my marriage. I don't trust Kevin. I became brave and I went on. However, the divorce isn't an easy decision for a woman who is over 40. To find a good mate is difficult at this age. He understood me totally, and he smiled at me with a warm comprehension. He said, Don't think we men can easily find a good mate either. There may be a larger selection to choose from, but the chance that we pick damaged goods is also greater. We laughed a little. I knew he thought I would not be a damaged goods for him. We went up by elevator to our floor. When we stepped out of the elevator, the corridor was empty. So we turned toward each other and hugged impulsively, then kissed long. After the kiss, I told him, Adam, we're free. We aren't cheaters. It's them who are. Our spouses are. He did not answer, only with a long, passionate kiss. Let's check the story from Adam's side. I went to Edmonton after the symposium to solve some problem at an oil and gas company. Emma sent her first email to me from our city when she arrived home. She wrote, I love you, and please do not forget that I will begin the divorce in grace. and you will follow me 3 months later. I will send my next mail next week. I answered, it will be difficult for you to wait a year. I love you too. We had discussed our future and had decided it together in the hotel. Emma would begin the divorce the following year in Grace, and I would follow her 3 months later. We would meet accidentally so that Emma could tell everybody she knew me from her PI video files and photos, and that's where I would be familiar to her. This would be a white lie to our families. We had not known that time, but Emma's idea of the 3 months delay for me turned out to be the most fantastic. I am thankful to her. It was 2.5 months delay in reality, but it was worth. I will tell later why it was a blessing. We would not meet at all until my divorce started. We arranged that we would write 1 email a week, except for emergency. I must emphasize again that it was very difficult for both of us, but we accomplished. The symposium was a big success for our firm, because a Finnish mining company wanted to use our machines and instruments for nickel mining. They developed a special mining technique, which uses bacteria to extract the nickel from the ore, and drilling instruments were needed to yield the nickel solution from the deep. I went to Finland several times to set our machines and instruments. This nickel mining was a financial success both for our partner and our company as well. I went home for the sake of my daughter only, and I used Rachel like a prostitute or a free-of-charge escort girl. I regarded her as a hooker in my mind. After my encounter with Emma, my hatred set in a level, and I checked my surveillance system weekly from my workplace. But Rachel did not take any more lovers in our house after the 18-year-old sex student neighbor boy who went to college in another city. She might have had other lovers at her workplace, but the house was lover-free, according to my bugs and video cameras. I wanted to use the video files to avoid the counseling session ordered by the court. I wrote in an email to Emma that I was thinking of buying a tape measure to cut a little of it day by day until the divorce started. She replied that she laughed a lot at my idea. I was glad to have found a woman with such a good sense of humor as Emma. Rachel lacked any sense of humor. While Nora was at college studying to be a math teacher, my younger daughter, Grace, wanted to be a nurse, so she wanted to go to college, too. When she graduated from high school, I went to her graduation ceremony with Rachel. Emma sent her most important email to me after her son's graduation, saying I gave Kevin the divorce documents and he was glad for it. He told me he would have given me his divorce documents if Ed had gone to college. The damn son of the bitch. I was right about him. I hired a condo with 2 rooms. Thank you for waiting for me. You will be with me soon. I love you. Meanwhile, at the college, Nora found a guy for a serious relationship from our city. He was a cocky, noisy guy. I did not like him, but I did not tell my opinion about Luke Marino to Nora, who thought she found the right man. Emma and I planned the 3 months delay, but how the 3 months became 2.5 months, I tell you now. Nora often brought Luke to our home, but sometimes they went to Luke's parents as well. When he was at us, he was very cheeky with me. I was tolerant with him for the sake of my daughter. Rachel liked him. The last 2 months passed slowly before I finally went to the divorce lawyer. Emma and I chose different lawyers to avoid any connection between us. The lawyer told me he would be ready with the documents within 2 weeks. I could begin the divorce when I wanted. I wrote this to Emma. Emma answered she found an apartment for me 3 buildings from hers, and there was a supermarket in between. She wrote we could meet there accidentally after my divorce began. I used the secret money and I rented the recommended apartment for 4 months, and I took some of my personal belongings to the apartment. Soon after this, I had to go to Finland for a week to solve some problem. When I came back and I went to work, I checked my secret spy system routinely. I wanted to delete the files, but I almost fell off from my chair when I looked at the video files more thoroughly. The cocky, impertinent Luke Marino, my older daughter's right man, was the lover of my cheating wife. As our divorce was to be started soon, Rachel could have had a lover like a White Walker from the Game of Thrones, E.T., or a Green Martian. It didn't matter to me. However, my daughter's happiness was one of my most important things in my life, so I was totally angry with Rachel and Luke. I saved the files to a thumb drive. I wrote an email to Emma. I knew Emma checked her emails several times a day for emergency in the last days. I was right, and she answered quickly, Adam, you should speed up the divorce proceedings. Tomorrow you should move to your apartment. You should invite your daughters into the apartment for a cinema performance. You had enough room for 3 people in your apartment for 1 week. College start. Good luck. I love you. I phoned my lawyer for my job, and I asked the divorce documents for Friday. I asked a day off from my boss because of family problems for the next day. When Rachel went to work, I took many of my personal things in the apartment. My daughters went away before Rachel, so they were clueless about everything. I phoned them at lunchtime, and I told them to meet me in front of the building where my apartment was. We went up to my apartment. They understood that I wanted to divorce, but they were astonished, sad, and silent. We were sitting in front of my laptop, and I put the thumb drive into the laptop. Nora asked me, Dad, what do you want to show us? I answered with a question. Have you ever watched spicy sex videos? Dad, we live in the 21st century, answered my daughters together. These files will be very funny with interesting actors, I said. Nora began to understand something, but Grace was a little confused yet. I began to play the videos. My two daughters were hot from the anger. First Nora, then Grace began to cry loudly when they saw the betrayal. Daddy, who are these people? I've no mother any longer, and I've no boyfriend either, sobbed Nora. Daddy, we're with you, said Grace in crying voice. I don't want to live with my mother. I've no mother now, said Nora. Then Grace added, still crying, Daddy, I want to live with you until I start the nurse college. I won't go back to our house. Could we remain here with you? Forced Nora. We should go to the house for your most important things before she arrives home from her job, I told them. So we brought many personal things of my daughters in my and Nora's cars. We put everything in pile in my apartment. Nora phoned Luke later. I heard her saying, Dear son of a bitch, I wish you much pleasure with your cougar. Go to hell. Then she closed the line. When Rachel came home, she tried to phone Grace, Nora, and me, but we did not answer. Next day she tried again. But when she got the divorce documents, she stopped phoning. She understood everything. I thought, Luke Marino informed her as well. My daughters told me they would never talk with their mom again. They love only me. I was proud of my daughters, and every night when I went to bed I cried a little from the pride and the fondness in secret. I wrote everything to Emma, but in a way that my daughters could not note anything about her. Emma wrote that her sons suspected something about Kevin's mistress because they told her they preferred her to their father. The following week, I checked the spy system and I found that Rachel cried in the house all day after arriving home from work. My daughters, and I did not feel sorry for her at all. Luke Marino was not on the video files anymore. Later, when she was at her job, I brought some of my further personal items from the house and Michael Kevin's son, and I dismounted the surveillance system. Emma wrote she saw me several times with my daughters, but she did not want to disturb us. When my daughters and Emma's sons left for their colleges, Emma and I met accidentally in front of the local supermarket, just as we had organized it on email. We hugged each other smiling, and we stuck together in a passionate kiss. Let's check the story from Adam's side. Emma and I became a couple, and we had two secrets from the world, Calgary and this. Our children began the baby factory, so we had to repay the babysit occasions, but we did it with pleasure to look after our grandchildren. Nora started, then Ed, and George with Grace followed. They repeated this round again. Our children were 5 years old when we four went to a restaurant to celebrate Emma's birthday. We entered the restaurant when I recognized Luke Marino. He was with his wife and with a 2-year-old boy and a 2-month baby girl in a baby carriage. They were just leaving the restaurant, so we met in the center of the place. He recognized me too, and he told me in a very loud, sarcastic voice in my face, Hi, Chicken Daddy, a new hooker? I answered from my gut without thinking of the 4 children who were with us. Dear Luke, are your children from your mother-in-law? Is your mother-in-law good in bed? When I said this, I looked at his wife, who was a little astonished by the awkward situation. Luke's arm moved quickly and his fist knocked my head. Total KO. I fell unconscious for half a minute and collapsed on the floor. When I returned to consciousness, I saw Luke weltered in pain on the floor beside me and wailed loudly, gripping his balls. My wife Emma was standing with her arms on her waist and was just telling everybody in the restaurant, if somebody tries to injure my husband, they'll get the same balls kicked from me. I was a good soccer player. While Luke's wife was trying to help him, I could stand up with the help of my wife. The staff of the restaurant ran to us to separate the two families, but Luke could not stand up from the floor. He was moaning from the constant pain, so the ambulance was called and Luke was taken to the hospital. Next day, the police came to us to interview my wife and me. The doctors had operated on Luke. He lost one of his testicles as a result of my wife's successful soccer free kick. It was destroyed totally, and the other testicle had to heal up for weeks. He became sterile. Luke's wife had denounced my wife to the police. We asked for help from George, who recommended his colleague. He was a good criminal lawyer. He found the restaurant had a security video system, and he suggested the police ask for the video file from them. The restaurant provided a copy of the security video file. The police and the district attorney office watched the video file, and they determined my wife defended me after an unexpected attack, so the court would reject the criminal case. The staff of the restaurant told the same thing to the police. Our lawyer got a copy of the video recorded by the restaurant's camera. We celebrated the rejected accusation with a whole family meeting in our house. The main event was when we watched the security video together. My daughters and I remembered an earlier cinema event One of the main characters in that video was same person, Luke. We copied the restaurant's file to a DVD and we watched it on the TV. We watched it more than 10 times, actually. At that scene when Emma kicked Luke's balls, whole family shouted loudly, "Goal! Goal! Bomb goal! Mom, you are a superstar. Emma, you are super." Everybody behaved as if they were supporters watching a soccer game. After the 10th replay, we stopped the video and such a thing happened, which Emma and I and our children would not forget until death. My 2 daughters came to my wife. Each Emma and I did not know anything. Our children organized this. Nora began, "Emma, thank you for saving our daddy. We've no mom and we ask you." Nora and Grace. Grace was pregnant with her second child. The serious, responsible mom started to cry and Emma did the same. At last Grace finished Nora's words. "We would like to ask you to be our true mom." They gave the 2 bouquets of flowers to Emma, who accepted them, and she wiped her eyes. She said feelingly, "Nora, Grace, ever since I got to know your dad, I've thought of you as my true daughters." She hugged Nora first and then Grace. Every adult in the room cried. The older children looked at their parents surprised, wondering what the matter was. However, they soon recognized that the adults were crying from the happiness. Ed said, and told Grace and Nora why they didn't dare to ask Emma about this. Emma looked at and with watery eyes and told her, "Thank you and for being so smart and wise." Emma and I hugged each other and started to kiss. The younger adults began shouting, "Get a room!" Everybody began laughing or smiling to put an end to the serious minutes. Emma whispered in my ear, "Adam, thank you for giving me such happiness." Every guest went home. We bedded our twins. After shower, we went to bed. We had sex twice a day. Emma looked at me in a loving way, and she told me, "I fell in love with you when you talked about your daughters." I answered, "So did I. When you talked about your sons." We smiled at each other. Grace and George had their second child, a baby girl. I thought the baby factory closed. Around this time, Ed and Ann came to us on a Saturday for a lunch with the grandchildren, and Ed began to talk about his father. Ed met him in the morning, and he brought very fresh news from him. When we put down the children for their afternoon nap, he told us the latest news. My father wants to divorce Nancy. He moved to a condo. I and George assisted him in the morning. Emma and I looked at each other, surprised. Emma asked, "Do you know what happened?" "Yes." Father suspected something, so he used an infidelity home test, and the test showed positive result. He went to his divorce lawyer and a PI firm. I know his lawyer. I met him during my divorce proceedings, said Emma. Ed continued. The PI firm found a rather young stud, who's a police investigator sergeant, who's her lover now. He's 4 years younger than Nancy. Interesting. Kevin likes the young gals too, remarked Emma, at which point everybody started to laugh. The lawyer suggested that my father should have a DNA test to establish paternity for the children. The results showed that the elder girl, Patricia, is not his, so the younger girl, Susan, is my blood sister alone. We were astonished a little. I broke the silence. It's like when the executioner gets the capital punishment. Everybody laughed loudly. Ed carried on. The lawyer told my father that even though he had a prenuptial agreement, he would still have to pay children's support for Patricia as well, because Patricia was above 4 years when the DNA test was made. The lawyer advised my father to find out who was the biological father of Patricia. If he knew who the man was, he could start a lawsuit against him to pay the children's support money in settlement. My father remained at home with Nancy for a while, and he played an actor's role, and said he played his role well enough. We didn't suspect anything for 2 months at all. Father told Nancy he knew Patricia wasn't his, but he would like to reconcile for Susan's sake. Nancy isn't too smart, and she believed this. My father got all information from Nancy this week, so he's begun the divorce, explained Ed. Who's the biological father of Patricia? Asked Emma and I almost at the same time. Even Nancy doesn't know that. She was at an orgy with her friends, while my father was away on a business travel. The men were unknown people, and she had sex with more than 8 males that day. But she drank much alcohol too, so the 8 people may actually be even 10. She doesn't remember their names at all. She did sex bareback, and she was lucky to avoid STDs. She's not too smart, said Ed. If your father had had a DNA test made for you and George, he wouldn't have been disappointed at all, replied Emma. Mom, George and I know this, of course, Ed assured her. We soon got to know that the court gave alimony to Nancy for 5 years, and she got the children custody, because Susan was below 4 years. Kevin would pay child support for both children and Nancy got the house until Susan turns 18 years old. The prenuptial prevented Kevin from having a 50-50 share. Kevin promised he would try to treat Susan and Patricia the same way, but he warned the family that he would not be able to hide that he loved his biological daughter, Susan, better. He would give less in his will to Patricia than to his other 3 biological children. We organized our birthday day together with the twins and scheduled the all-family event for Saturday or Sunday. So, the small family event for my birthday took place on Wednesday. We went to a restaurant, and we had told our older children where we would go. We arrived at the restaurant in time, and we sat down at the table. When the waitress brought the menu, we realized that the woman sitting at the next table alone was Rachel. Emma and I looked at each other in surprise. Why was she here? Then Rachel began to cry. We sat there in shock. It was an awkward situation. Mommy, Daddy, why is this woman crying here? Kids asked confusedly and curiously. I was astonished from the situation, but Emma knew what to say. Kids, this crying is a special birthday present for Daddy, she said sarcastically. I prefer cheerful presents, replied one. So do I, reinforced the other. The waitress came with the first round dishes, and she put them on our table and went away. Suddenly, Rachel stood up and told me, Happy birthday, Adam. Then she told Emma, Emma, you're a lucky woman? She turned to all of us. Bon appetit. Goodbye. Bye-bye, Rachel, we told her, and she left. Emma and I looked at each other, and we thought the same. We should keep secret about our birthday restaurant in the future. I said. You're right. Next time Kevin will come to our restaurant to cry at the end, Emma replied. We laughed a lot. We got to know that at work Rachel had asked Kevin about the place of our birthday supper, while Kevin had learned it from George. We had kept secret about our birthday restaurant since then. Our elder children understood us, and they told us they would blurt out to Kevin accidentally. Emma and me got information about Rachel from her relatives, because my older daughters had some connection to their relatives from Rachel's side. She lived together with a man for 3 years, who left her for a younger woman. She had been alone for a half year, and we thought this action was a step to the peace. She would have liked to meet the grandchildren. However, my older daughters told us their true mom was Emma, and they did not want to meet Rachel. This action did not bring peace for her, as every time since the big event Emma was standing in front of her collection of shoes for a long time, and finally she selected the strongest pair of shoes, saying, Honey, strong shoes are very important in case of emergency. They may be our secret weapons. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Ben hated airports. They were a necessary evil for his job, but they were slowly eroding his marriage. To him, they symbolized an endless sea of people being herded like cattle to their destinations. Yet, if he was honest with himself, the experience had improved over the years. Maybe it was time to adjust his perspective, to accept that it was just another part of his well-compensated career, something he had to endure but could manage. A decade ago, air travel had been a series of endless lines, checking in, security, boarding, and then waiting again while others struggled to fit their bags into overhead compartments. He remembered dragging himself to the back of the plane, enduring every delay and inconvenience. Now, thanks to experience and status, things had changed. He rarely checked luggage, packing light for his frequent trips. TSA pre-check had slashed his time in security lines, and his years of cross-country travel had earned him elite status with his favorite airline. He no longer sat at the back, and boarding after first class had become the norm. Lounge access, courtesy of his credit card, had also softened the edges of his travel routine. The Miami Airport Lounge, in particular, was a welcome respite. Despite these improvements, he still didn't enjoy air travel, at least, not usually. But today was different. In the lounge, he met Kathy, a striking middle-aged woman who looked several years younger than him. She wore a frilly, low-cut dress that was partly concealed by a cardigan, though she didn't seem too concerned with keeping it fully covered. As they chatted about their respective travel experiences, Kathy gradually let the cardigan slip just enough to draw his attention. He found himself captivated, exchanging travel war stories with her, laughing more than he usually did. By the time their conversation ended, Kathy handed him a business card. It wasn't just the card that left an impression, though. There was an undeniable chemistry. Something stirred in Ben, leaving him wondering whether today's cross-country trips, and despite his dislike of airports, he was in a decent mood due to the earlier lounge conversation and some success on his trip, which would pave the way to an extra bonus next quarter. He had just sat down on his plane, in the larger Economy Plus seat, to return home when his phone rang. He was about to put it into airplane mode when it happened. It was his wife, Rachel. Sigh. It was very early in Denver for her to be awake, much less calling. Given the hour of the morning, he wondered if it was important. Probably. His finger hovered over the phone to answer. Then he turned the phone off. If it had been one of his kids, he certainly would have answered it. But whatever that bad of a wife of his wanted could wait. He admitted that the travel, which started 10 years ago, though limited, had been hard on them, but it shouldn't have caused so many arguments. He was rarely gone more than 6 nights a month, but he guessed that had become too much. Women. He wished his wife were more understanding. When he told her about the new position all those years ago and the increase in salary and bonus, his wife practically pushed him out the door, and then she would welcome him, and his money, home with open arms and legs. Now, even with his efforts to wine and dine her more and spend more time with her, she had become distant. Recently, his boss told him that if he would accept the new position, which required more travel, he could make even more money. He hadn't mentioned that offer to his wife. To do so would serve no good purpose. The whole situation saddened him, but he still had his kids, who were fantastic. He loved his children. His daughter, Janet, had just entered pharmacy school in the fall, and his son, Tim, was grinding through summer school to get a head start on his junior year in engineering, like his dad. Both parents were expectedly proud. He missed attending their events and missed having them underfoot. He guessed Rachel did too, as she has seemed sad lately. Whatever their current troubles, they had raised 2 exceptional kids. Smart, fun, hardworking, selfless, humorous. They had received many compliments on them over the years. He wished he could see more of them. With the children now having places of their own nearby, he had thought of downsizing from that big-assed house. Rachel wouldn't hear of it. In addition to her work at a hospital as one of their finance execs, she was on multiple charity boards, and the house, neighborhood, and neighbors fit her image. A little extra house and yard maintenance compared to a smaller house was one of the sacrifices Ben was expected to make for his wife's social standing. Sigh. The flight languished as it often does, or more accurately, he was languishing on the long flight. He wasn't in the mood for a movie, and he didn't get much sleep during the trip, so he decided to close his eyes for a few minutes while he could. It was the bump of the plane touching the ground that had awakened him. He was surprised that he had slept almost the whole trip. He turned his phone back on, and it looked like something had blown up. Voicemails and messages from everyone that was close to him. He rang his daughter. "My God, Dad. Thank goodness you called. Janet, you knew I was on a plane. What's going on? Everyone has been trying to get a hold of me, but no one has told me anything. Well, I'm not going to either at the moment. Stop by my place, since it is on your way home. Tim will be here, too. Janet, you can't leave me like this. Are you and your brother okay? Is your mother okay? Is anyone hurt? I'm sorry, Daddy. It's just a big mess. No one is hurt. Well, no one we love. I'll explain what I know when I see you." What the hell? Ben made record time from Denver International to his daughter's place near the university. He knocked hurriedly on the door, and she was almost in tears when he walked in. He saw his son sitting solemnly in one of her chairs. "What's wrong, baby?" "Oh, Daddy, we're so sorry. It's a huge mess." Tim spoke up, more like a clusters hit. "Tell me, what happened?" Janet continued. "We didn't mean for any of this to happen. It just sort of snowballed." "Didn't mean for what to happen?" "Well, we meant for some of it to happen, but not like this." "Honey, you haven't told me anything yet. Tell me." Okay. It started about a month ago when you were on your last trip to Boston. I was going to drive over and visit Mom at dinner time, and as I approached, I saw a strange Tesla pulling into your garage spot, which was odd. I didn't recognize the car or know who it could be. From the street, I could see that the lights in the house were on, and by the way the shadows moved, I saw someone walking through the house towards the garage. I called Mom on her cell, and she didn't answer. I waited a few more minutes and called her again. When she did answer, I asked her if she was home, and she said that she was still at work and would talk to me later. Obviously, I suspected this was a lie, so I hung up and watched the house a little longer wondering what to do. After a while, I pulled my car out of sight and snuck to look in the garage window. Mom's car was there along with the Tesla's. I was furious. I returned to my car, called Tim, and told him what I saw. I wanted to know who was with Mom. With my anger stoked, I watched the first 6 hours for him to leave, and Tim came and watched until he left at 7 a.m. the next morning. Tim followed him to his work at a large office building in Cherry Creek, walked in a few minutes later, and asked the security guard if he recognized the man that just entered. He gave Tim a name, and Tim called me. We didn't know what to do. I called Mom the next morning, not happy that she didn't return my call, and have been cool towards her ever since. On your last trip, we were watching, and the same thing happened. So, Tim and I decided to do something about it. Tim jumped in. I was there when you checked all the smoke detectors a few weeks ago, and when I saw the one in the garage, I got an idea, which we thought was funny at the time. I guess it isn't funny now. We were afraid to tell you, because we knew you would want to catch them in the act and would probably kill the maggot and wind up killing Mom, too. Either accidentally or intentionally and land yourself in jail. We didn't want that. We wanted to think of a way to out them and embarrass them at the same time. I suggested to Janet that I sneak into the garage around midnight and cause one of those unexpected sparks that's known to happen from time to time with electric cars to create enough smoke to set off the alarm. With the smoke detectors in good working order, I didn't think much would happen, except the fire department showing up. Ben replied, I guess this means that you didn't know it was a heat detector, not a smoke detector in the garage. Tim had a surprised look on his face and said, oh, shit. That's why it took so long for the alarm to go off. Ben shook his head. Janet jumped in. We thought that the fire department having to come would be embarrassing, but not enough, so I sort of got involved too. Ben looked stunned at all the different implications of what his kids told him began to sink in. He asked, so it sounds like my marriage has burnt to the ground. Is our house still there? Janet replied, what? Oh yeah. Well, most of it. Oh God. I visited the house after Mom went to work both times, and both times one of Mom's Magnum bottles of wine was in the trash. I know she likes to keep a bottle on chill most of the time, so this seemed like the perfect opportunity to add to their embarrassment. It's really easy to get Viagra, or its equivalent online these days, so I ordered some. You know that I'm studying to be a pharmacist, and with my degree in chemistry, it wasn't hard to convert the pills into a liquid. Ben interjected, you didn't. I'm afraid I did. Yesterday afternoon, I snuck into the house. I looked at the wine cooler and Mom had her Magnum bottle in the vertical slot already opened, resealed and standing. It appeared that only about a glass or two was missing, so I poured in my concoction, swirled it around and returned it, carefully leaving no trace that I was there. We thought that they would have to run out of the house when the fire department showed up, and he wouldn't be able to hide his condition, which would expose her and her lover to all the neighbors. Tim said, just before midnight, I crawled through a window in the garage that I had unlocked the last time I visited. It took a while, but using the charging port on the car and some tools, I was able to create an arc repeatedly enough that the metal around the area became hot. I don't know if his car was defective or what, but suddenly a shower of sparks started. I knew that would set off the smoke alarm, or so I thought, and I got the hell out of there. Apparently, after I left, it did more than that. I never thought the actual battery would catch on fire. I guess it did, because before the fire department could get there, not only was his car on fire, but so was Mom's. By now the house alarm was going crazy and the whole neighborhood could hear. Janet said, you know how flustered Mom gets when she's upset. It's like her brain simply disconnects from her body. This is where the story gets interesting. Ben said, more interesting than my wife cheating on me and my house burning down? Janet continued, we told you it didn't burn down. Oh, great. Anyway, during the few minutes I was allowed to talk to Mom this morning, she told me that she jumped out of bed when she heard the alarm. She shook her lover, Roger, but he wouldn't wake up. She knew he had drunk a lot, but she couldn't wake him. She thought he was dead and became hysterical. She called 911 from the house phone and started yelling, fire. Call an ambulance. Then she grabbed him by the ankles and started pulling him out of the bedroom and towards the exit, not realizing or thinking about their both being naked. He was too heavy for her to lift down the stairs, so she kept dragging him. Again, she wasn't thinking, so he was face down. Remember my telling you that there was a carpet tack near the entrance to your bedroom that had popped up enough to snag one of my socks a few months ago when I was visiting? Well, it seems that either you didn't fix it, or another one popped back up, because guess what? Mom dragged Roger across that area, and he must have been heavy enough, or it popped up more, and it caught him. This is where him drinking all that Viagra with the wine comes into play. Not only did the carpet tack slice his testicles, which were being dragged underneath him, but his pecker was still hard, and the tack sliced it and all the way up his abdomen and face too. Being somewhat dark in the house, and his being unconscious, Mom didn't know this and continued to drag him down the stairs. Bop, bop, bop. I almost feel bad for the dude. In addition to his 3-foot-long scratch, which was bleeding profusely from his groin, he has carpet burns from his balls to his nose, which must have busted open when it landed going from the bottom step onto the tile floor in the kitchen. Thwop. I'm sure being dragged across that tile and out the front door didn't feel very good either, especially when his head went across the threshold and banged off the concrete porch and down the stairs onto the sidewalk. Bop, bop, thwop. It looks like he has road rash and a nasty gash on his face. Ben wasn't feeling too bad about this at the moment and replied, you don't say. Tim took over the story. The house alarm must have woken the rest of the neighborhood, because it seems there was quite the audience when Mom dragged her lover, both of them naked, out the front door, in front of everyone. Timothy from across the street even videoed the scene on his phone and sent it to me. Watch this. Ben couldn't believe what he was seeing. On Tim's phone was a video of his wife, backing naked out of the front of the house, and sure enough, Roger's head was bopping off the concrete on the way down the steps, while Rachel continued to drag him. Either her adrenaline was really going, or she was stronger than he realized. The EMS and fire department arrived immediately after. He watched as the crews ran into the house to open the garage door and began hosing everything down in the garage and around that area of the house. An EMS approached his naked wife with an emergency blanket to cover her and rolled Roger over. His bleeding pecker was still hard and flopping around for everyone to see. Ben could tell that he won that comparison versus her lover. Phew, Tim told him. Did you know that those electric vehicles will send an alert to your phone when something odd happens to your car? Apparently, Roger's wife, Nancy, received a message, and seeing that her husband's car was at someone's house, instead of at the airport, where it was supposed to be, she came to investigate. As Ben continued to watch, he saw that they couldn't revive Roger. He was alive, but unconscious. They brought a gurney from the EMS vehicle, but before they could strap him in, Nancy appeared and flipped it over, causing her husband to go flying, pecker first, onto the pavement. He was going to need more than a few sticks to take care of that, and the new cut on his head. Pity. Ben couldn't remember ever seeing anyone so angry. She landed several good kicks to his groin before they could drag her away from him, still kicking. When they put him back onto the gurney, his pecker, still bleeding, now looked to be crooked, where it wasn't a few minutes ago. He wondered if Roger was awake when they tried to fix that. He hoped so. Rachel stood there aghast as there were at least a dozen or so of her socially adept neighbors watching the tragic comedy unfold. Nancy turned on Rachel, but rather than hitting her, she yanked the blanket away, leaving Rachel naked again for at least a minute, until another blanket could be located, and she could be recovered. Having seen his wife naked on their front yard, Ben thought, damn, I'm going to miss those tits. However, the neighbors certainly weren't missing them, nor her landing strip. Safe to say her care of her privates was no longer, private. Shame. When the officers arrived, the blaze appeared to be mostly under control, except for Roger's car, which was still spitting sparks and smoldering. Nancy, practically foaming at the mouth, was yelling at the police to arrest Rachel. On what charge? Nobody knew, but an officer led her, visibly shaken, to the back of a squad car simply to keep her away from Nancy and the onlookers. Janet said, "We knew Roger was married to Nancy, but we didn't know she was the daughter of the district attorney. It seems like she, or he, had enough pull that they decided to take Mom to the station and put her in an interrogation room the rest of the night, wearing nothing but that blanket. They let her go around 6 a.m., which was when she tried to call you, but you didn't answer. And some people say God isn't merciful. The problem is that because Roger didn't wake up right away, they did a toxicology on him, and the only odd thing they found was trace amounts of the Viagra. When his wife heard that, she went ballistic because he has a heart condition and would never take something like that. Or so she said. The medics said it was a good thing the fire happened because it meant he got to the hospital early enough for them to prevent him from going into a coma. Otherwise, it could have really gotten bad. Ben asked, "Worse than this?" Tim jumped in. The police returned Mom to the interrogation room and went back to the house this morning to try to gather some kind of evidence. But the firemen knocked the bottle and glasses onto the floor during the fire, smashing them. With all the water and destruction of the bottles and the wine residue, there isn't any uncontaminated evidence to collect. I stopped by earlier, and the only thing there for the police to see was the blood trail down the steps and out the door. I suspect they are just rattling her cage now. Everyone thinks he took a Viagra, even though he wasn't supposed to, and without any evidence, I'll be surprised if they hold her much longer. Also, they were able to haul the Teslas out of the garage, and it's been taken away. Nancy has been all over the news this morning. It hasn't been pretty. Ben asked, "Where is your mother now?" Janet said, "She's still at the police station. They said they would call us when we could go and get her." "I'm sorry, Daddy. We should have just told you instead of our trying to get even. We were so angry and just made a bad situation worse." While his children looked terrified, a smile was beginning to slowly spread across Ben's face. He stood and said, "I appreciate what you guys tried to do, truly. It means a lot to me. Honestly, I don't think you made it any worse. All things considered, I think things turned out pretty good. I'm going to the house now. Your mother is going to need both of you. I'll let the two of you decide who is going to pick her up from the station. It won't be me." They understood. On the way home, Ben stopped at the bank and transferred half their accounts into a new account with his name only. He would take care of the rest of the finances late in the afternoon or tomorrow. He stopped at the local market and picked up some trash bags to take his clothes to the cleaners, because he suspected everything in the house now smelled like smoke. Approaching the house, he could see, but didn't really pay much attention to the fire damage. The blood trail across the porch and down the steps were clearly visible. He smiled. Entering the front door, which had been closed but not locked, the blood trail went all the way up the steps. The portion of the kitchen leading into the garage looked like a war zone. Too bad. Paying the blood no more attention, he went to the master bedroom and put all his clothes into the bags to take to the cleaners. His insurance company would get the bill. He could see the bed still disheveled, and that thought saddened him for a moment, but only a moment. He knew what he was going to do. Divorcing the 304 was the obvious starting point. Separate the finances, find an apartment, take on more travel at higher pay, and use his newfound free time to visit more often with his kids and have a lot more fun. He wondered if Tim could forward the video to him, so he could send it to the local news stations. Rachel's volunteer organizations would be so proud to have one of their board members increasing their publicity. As he loaded the last bag into his car, a police vehicle approached. They asked to see some ID, and he showed it to them. Having heard about what happened, and maybe even having been there or seen video, one of the officers looked uncomfortable but asked anyway, "Are you going to be okay?" In a fraction of a second, all of the events of the day spun over and over through Ben's mind like one of those old-fashioned wheels that people would spin in game shows. When the wheel in his mind stopped on Kathy's business card, a broad grin appeared on Ben's face as he replied, "I'll be fine, officer. I'm going to be just fine." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
The soft hum of classical music filled the air, setting a romantic mood in the dimly lit restaurant, its warm glow casting a gentle ambience over the evening. Barbara adjusted her wine glass, tapping her manicured nails lightly against it as she leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Jake across the table. Jake's confident grin widened. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his tailored suit spoke to the authority of a man who was used to taking charge. As head of the marketing department, Jake had the kind of charisma that could command a boardroom and Barbara's heart. Tonight marked a secret anniversary, 6 months since their affair began. For Barbara, every glance, every touch shared across the mahogany table carried a thrilling sense of forbidden excitement. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of joy and mischief as she sipped her wine, savoring both its rich flavor and the intoxicating presence of Jake. Their romance had grown in the midst of office life. Barbara, once diligent and reserved, found herself irresistibly drawn to Jake's magnetic personality during late-night meetings and shared projects. He was everything her husband, David, was not: spontaneous, daring, and capable of making her feel truly alive. David, her husband of 5 years, was steady and reliable, a man who loved her with a quiet devotion and had stood by her through thick and thin. But with Jake, she felt something she hadn't in years: passion, excitement, a spark of electricity that surged through her veins. As she traced the rim of her glass, Barbara's mind briefly wandered to the life she'd left behind for this fleeting passion. David, who had built their life together with patience and sacrifice, was everything she once believed she wanted. But with Jake, there were no routines, no expectations, just stolen moments of wild excitement. Where David offered stability and comfort, Jake represented fire and adrenaline, a contrast that Barbara found herself craving more and more. Her thoughts were pulled back to the present as Jake's voice filled the air. His hand rested lightly on hers, sending a jolt of energy through her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his deep voice soft. Barbara smiled, tilting her head coyly. "Just how lucky I am to be here with you tonight," she replied. Jake grinned, clearly pleased, and raised his glass. "To 6 unforgettable months," he toasted. Barbara echoed him, her voice steady, though inside, a quiet battle raged. She was breaking every rule she once held dear, yet her heart raced with defiance. After all, there was only one life to live, and she wanted it all, rules and morality be damned. Jake leaned in, his fingers gently wrapping around her hand, his dark eyes glinting with mischief. "Are you thinking too much again?" he asked softly. "Maybe you're worried about your husband, David? By the way, how's he doing?" Barbara let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. "Oh, everything's fine. My husband's like any other husband, though he's been a little on edge lately. He visited his parents at their ranch a couple of days ago. Hasn't seen them in a while, and he's especially concerned about his father. He's getting older, and David feels guilty for not visiting more often, Jake raised an intrigued eyebrow. A ranch? I never figured David for the cowboy type. Barbara giggled, a blush creeping across her cheeks. Oh, trust me, David's no cowboy. He's too calm and kind. His personality just doesn't match that kind of spirit. Jake smirked, his voice teasing. A real man should passionately love a woman, take risks, be adventurous. Not some gray worm. His words hung in the air, charged with playful defiance. Then, with a wicked grin, he leaned closer. Now, me, I'm a real man. And after dinner, we're going to have a race, a real love race. Barbara's cheeks flushed deeper, laughter escaping her lips at his audacity. She tilted her head, her voice turning flirtatious as she responded, Is that so? Well, I think I'm up for the challenge. A love race, huh? And what exactly does that involve? Barbara teased, her voice soft as she leaned in closer. Jake leaned forward, his lips just a whisper away from hers. Let's just say it's not for the faint of heart. You'll have to trust me, he murmured, his voice low and confident. Barbara was about to offer a flirtatious reply when their conversation was interrupted by the waiter, who arrived with 2 covered desserts, placing them on the table. Excuse me, Barbara said, furrowing her brows in confusion. We didn't order dessert. The waiter smiled politely, his hands clasped behind his back. It's a gift. Barbara turned her gaze to Jake, her eyes sparkling with both suspicion and delight. Honey, maybe you arranged this surprise? Jake leaned back, a smug smile on his face. Oh, I'm a master of surprises. But come on, ordering dessert? That's way too small for my scale. The waiter chuckled softly and stepped away, leaving the 2 of them to stare at the mysterious desserts before them. Barbara laughed, the tension from earlier melting away. A gift, huh? Maybe the universe is sending us a sign, a little cosmic approval of our arrangement. Jake raised his wine glass, his grin confident. To signs from the universe. They clinked glasses, their laughter blending with the soft hum of the restaurant. The moment felt surreal, perfect, even as if their clandestine relationship was somehow blessed by fate. The atmosphere shifted as Jake reached for the lid of his dessert, lifting it with a flourish. Inside, an elegant piece of chocolate cake was topped with glossy icing, with a Joker playing card stuck in the center. Jake tilted his head, a half-smile forming on his lips. What the hell? He muttered, plucking the card from the cake. I don't get it. What kind of stupid joke is this? Barbara, sitting across from him, felt a pang of unease at the sight of the card. Her fingers drummed nervously against the table as she reached for her own dessert. Slowly, she removed the lid, revealing a similar piece of cake. But atop hers was something more, a glint of metal. A cherry impaled on a ring sat perched on top. For a moment, Barbara's breath caught in her throat as her mind jumped to a romantic conclusion. Jake, she said, her voice nervous, holding the cake closer. I have a ring. Are you really? Wait. Her voice faltered, and her heart dropped as her eyes widened in horror. Jake, this is David's wedding ring. Panic surged through her chest. Her hands trembled as her mind raced. How was her husband's ring here, in this restaurant? Her thoughts spun, each possibility more terrifying than the last. She stared at Jake, but he seemed more annoyed than alarmed. They sat in uncomfortable silence, each trying to process the bizarre turn of events. Then, a shadow fell over the table as a man impeccably dressed in a crisp suit approached. Without invitation, he sat down, his presence radiating authority. His sharp, steady gaze carried the precision of someone used to command. Barbara and Jake exchanged bewildered glances but didn't speak. I beg your pardon, ladies and gentlemen, the man said, his voice calm and measured. I won't take up much of your time. His composed demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos at the table. Jake, ever brash, leaned forward. His expression hardened. What the hell is going on? Who are you? And what kind of twisted joke is this? Are you looking for trouble? The man remained unflustered. My name is William, he said, his tone unwavering. I would ask you to remain calm. There's no need for aggression. From his jacket, William pulled out a slim leather folder and handed it to Barbara. Before the lady opens this, I have a proposition for you, Jake. Jake's eyes narrowed, suspicion clouding his expression. I understand you're a man who enjoys a good gamble, William continued, nodding toward the Joker card still clutched in Jake's hand. My client has a simple request. A bet, $50,000. If you're willing to make the wager, you can walk away tonight without further consequences. Jake burst into laughter, the sound echoing loudly enough to attract a few curious stares from nearby tables. Are you serious? Perhaps you also want me to strip on the table and dance for the audience? This is insane. Who's pulling the strings here? David? Is he your client? William's smile didn't falter. He nodded once, confirming Jake's suspicion. Barbara's fingers fumbled as she opened the folder William had handed her. Her gasp was audible as her eyes fell on the contents. Divorce papers, already signed and ready to file. No, no, this can't be happening, she stammered, her voice trembling. How did this even? What is this? Jake glanced at the papers, his expression turning smug. He leaned back in his chair, gesturing dismissively. Barbara, baby, he said, his voice dripping with bravado. I'm sure it's nothing. Don't worry about it. It seemed that David had decided to take a bold stand. Jake's response was nonchalant, as if it didn't faze him. So what? It's not a big deal. Honestly, it's about time you cut ties with that fool, he said, shrugging it off. Barbara's voice faltered as she tried to explain. Her mind was still reeling. Jake, you don't understand. David and I have so many unresolved financial issues, and now he's filed for divorce, out of nowhere. I don't even know what's going to happen. Jake leaned back in his chair, trying to project confidence. Relax, Barbara. We'll get a good lawyer, and your David will be begging for mercy before this is over. He dismissed William with a wave of his hand. As for this ruined evening, I'll take care of him. I'll show him his place before you even have to think about what happens next. Barbara's hands trembled as she opened the folder William had given her. Her breath caught in her throat when she saw the contents. Divorce papers, already signed, ready to be filed. No, this can't be happening, she stammered. How did this even? What is this? Jake glanced at the papers with a dismissive smirk. Barbara, baby, relax, he said, his voice oozing with confidence. It's about time you dumped that puppy. This whole thing is nothing. Barbara's anxiety only grew as Jake's callousness sank in. Her hands shook as she held the divorce papers in her lap. But Jake, this is serious. Before she could finish, William spoke again, his voice calm and steady. So, you're refusing my offer? He asked, his tone almost wearied. Of course, I'm refusing, Jake retorted, his voice rising. Why should I listen to some guy who thinks he can dictate terms to me? Let him go to hell. And you, get out of here too, or I'll call the staff to throw you out. William remained unfazed. I'm sorry, he said simply. No need to make a scene. I'll leave. Barbara has a surprise waiting for her at home. Good night. With that, he turned and walked away, his polished shoes clicking softly against the restaurant floor. Barbara's heart raced. A surprise, she echoed, her voice trembling. What is going on? Jake, I need to go home right now. I'm scared. Jake remained calm, flashing her a reassuring grin. Relax, Barbara. I'll go with you. Don't worry. I'll handle everything. You're with me now. She didn't respond, her thoughts swirling. Jake paid the bill and led her out, his upbeat demeanor a stark contrast to her growing sense of dread. The drive home was tense. While Jake hummed along to the radio, Barbara stared out the window, her mind filled with anxious thoughts. What if David is waiting for me at home? She asked softly. Jake chuckled, dismissing her fears. Even better. I'll have a little chat with him and put him in his place. Barbara didn't feel reassured. Maybe we shouldn't go. This has gone too far, Jake. But Jake interrupted her, his tone still light. Come on, Barbara. He's already filed for divorce, and he's got the papers ready. What's the difference now? Let's face the consequences, and I'll teach him a lesson. Barbara swallowed her fear, but it didn't ease the growing pit in her stomach. As they pulled into her driveway, her heart sank. The lights were on inside the house, glowing eerily through the windows. Jake parked with a flourish. Let's get this over with, he said, stepping out of the car with confident strides. Barbara followed him reluctantly, her steps heavy with dread. She knew whatever awaited them inside would not be good. As they entered the house, the silence was palpable. Barbara flipped the light switch, revealing an eerily quiet home. She glanced around, half expecting David to jump out from the shadows. But there was no sign of him. In fact, most of his belongings were gone. Jake chuckled, glancing around with satisfaction. See? I told you. He ran off like a coward. Probably back to his parents' ranch. Barbara didn't respond. Her eyes scanned the room, uneasy. Something wasn't right. Then, her gaze landed on the kitchen table where a sleek black folder rested, its presence conspicuous. A chill ran through her as she approached it. She opened the folder, gasping as she read the handwritten note inside. Darling, I know everything about your double life. I have 3 months' worth of evidence. Divorce is the only way for you to atone for your sins. But there will be consequences. And by the way, look in this folder for some information about your impudent lover. Barbara's heart raced. She flipped to the next set of documents, photographs and printouts that left her breathless. The images were of Jake, with other women, one at a restaurant, another at a hotel lobby, a third laughing with him at a bar. Tears welled in Barbara's eyes as she held the evidence out to Jake, her voice barely a whisper. What is this? Jake, what is this? Are you seeing other women? Barbara's voice quivered as she held up the photos. Jake's expression shifted from anger to a defensive smirk. This? It's a pathetic fake, he said, leaning closer to point at one of the images. Look at this one. It's clearly doctored. This woman? She's just a former client, a contractor I worked with. And this one? He jabbed at another photo, his tone quickening, is just a college friend. Sure, I was polite and friendly, but that's it. These are just photos from casual conversations. They're twisting things to make something out of nothing. Barbara sniffled, wiping her eyes as she tried to process his explanation. So you're saying these are all misunderstandings? Jake placed his hands on her shoulders, locking eyes with her. Absolutely. These photos are just designed to hurt us. It's all part of David's twisted game. Look closely. Do you see me kissing anyone? No. It's clearly fake, designed by a good editor. These are lies, Barbara. You can't let him get to you. Barbara hesitated but nodded, her doubts easing under Jake's reassurance. However, inside, Jake was seething, his mind racing for more excuses to cover up the damning evidence. He couldn't let Barbara suspect him, not now, especially with David's manipulative tactics at play. Barbara turned back to the folder, her blood running cold as she read the next note. Tell Jake that if he wants, he can make a $100,000 charitable donation to my account. It'll clear his conscience, and he can breathe easier. Jake's face twisted with fury as he read the note. This is insane, he roared. 100,000? What does he think this is, some kind of mob operation? He grabbed the papers, tearing them to shreds with raw anger. I'll tell you what's going to happen next. Tomorrow, I'm hiring the best damn lawyer in the city. We're going to destroy David in court, just like I'm ripping these papers apart. This ends now. Barbara watched him, a swirl of emotions running through her as Jake's fiery determination temporarily soothed her nerves. She clung to the belief that Jake was a man who would stand by her, no matter what. After tearing up the papers, Jake threw them into the trash and turned to Barbara. We're not letting him win. Trust me, Barbara. I've got this under control. Barbara wiped away her tears and nodded slowly, Jake's confidence spreading a small sliver of hope. The tension seemed to ease as Jake poured 2 glasses of whiskey, sliding one toward her. This will help you relax, he said smoothly. Barbara took the glass hesitantly, her mind still racing. Jake leaned in closer, his gaze intense. Let David go. This is your house now, without him. Let's make a statement. Barbara blinked, taken aback. Jake, I don't know. This feels strange. Jake grinned, his confidence unwavering. Strange? No, it's victory. It's us showing David that he doesn't own you anymore. Trust me, you'll thank me for this. His words, his tone, and his unrelenting charisma slowly wore down her resistance. Eventually, she relented, and he swept her into his arms, leading her to the bedroom. The next morning, Jake dressed sharply for work, fixing his tie as he spoke. Don't worry about a thing, babe. I'll cover for you at the office. I'll tell them you're sick and need a couple of days off. I'll also focus on finding a lawyer and putting together a plan to take down your bastard husband. Barbara nodded, still groggy but somewhat reassured by his confidence. Jake kissed her cheek and left for the day, leaving her alone in the house. As the silence settled around her, Barbara stared out the window, holding a cold cup of coffee. Maybe this is for the best, she murmured to herself. To hell with David. I'll have a different life now. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. A notification from her bank appeared on the screen. Your account has been frozen. Panic flooded her as she scrambled to log into her banking app. Her heart sank as she saw that the joint savings account had been emptied. All of it, transferred into separate accounts she couldn't access. Frantically, she called David, but the call went to voicemail. Her anxiety grew as each second passed, until her phone finally rang. It was David. Barbara answered with a mix of anger and desperation. David, what did you do? You froze my account and took our money. You're being a coward. You made a show of handing over documents yesterday, but we need to talk about all this. If you don't, I'm going to be very angry. David's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge of disappointment. Barbara, you made your choice. You'll get your explanations in court. Until then, I'm done discussing anything with you. You can't just, Barbara began. But David interrupted, his tone firm. I'm not interested in listening to you anymore. You didn't even bother to call me last night. Address all your questions to my lawyer. The line went dead, leaving Barbara trembling with fury and fear. Desperate for support, she dialed Jake. After a few rings, he answered, his voice unusually dry. Barbara explained what David had done, freezing the bank account and taking all the money. Jake listened calmly before replying, Barbara, we've got a problem. What now? She asked, her voice breaking. David is a sneaky bastard, Jake said, his tone turning serious. He's already informed the big bosses at the company. He told them about us, about the affair. Barbara gasped. What? What did you tell them to justify it? Jake sighed heavily. I told them it was a misunderstanding, that your husband is going crazy because of the divorce. I said he's paranoid and trying to ruin both of us out of spite. Did they believe you? The bosses are giving me some leeway. I'm a valuable asset to the company, so they're turning a blind eye for now. But I need to clean this up quickly. Barbara clutched her phone, her voice trembling. What do we do now? Jake's voice turned sharp and commanding. I'm looking for a lawyer. I'll involve some influential friends to make sure we win this. But Barbara, I need David's number. I have to talk to him man to man. She hesitated, unsure if giving Jake the number was the right choice. But Jake's confidence reassured her once more. Okay, she whispered, reciting David's number. Jake jotted it down. Don't worry, Jake said, his tone softening. I'll handle this. Barbara hung up, her nerves frayed but holding on to the hope that Jake would keep his promises. Jake paced the floor of his office, his phone pressed to his ear, his hand clenched into a fist as the line connected. The moment he heard David's voice, Jake launched into a tirade. Listen, you little punk, Jake growled. You've started a dangerous game, and you don't even realize what you've gotten yourself into. You've crossed all the lines, and now this is personal, a vendetta. David's silence on the other end only fueled Jake's anger. He continued, his voice dripping with disdain. But I'm giving you a chance, David. Divorce Barbara without any of your little tricks or schemes, and explain to me why the hell you're talking to my management about me and Barbara. You better fix this, apologize, and admit that it's all a misunderstanding. Do that, and I'll forget about you. Otherwise, Jake let the threat hang in the air, his tone menacing. David's faint chuckle came through the phone, followed by his calm response. A bet, he said, his voice dripping with confidence. That's all I offered you, Jake. A bet in the form of a charitable contribution. Consider it compensation for the damage you helped cause to my marriage. Barbara will bear full responsibility for her choices, and so will you. But you, Jake, your arrogance and impudence, those piss me off. Jake gritted his teeth, barely holding back his fury. Oh, you think you're clever, huh? David ignored him and continued, his voice composed but firm. Here's my last offer, Jake. Make a charitable contribution to my account, $200,000, and I'll ensure your nerves stay calm and your conscience gets a little clearer. Jake's voice exploded in rage. You think I'm going to roll over and hand you that kind of money? Who the hell do you think you are? I'll crush you like a bug. You hear me? I have real friends, powerful ones. I'll bring in the best damn lawyer money can buy, and you'll regret ever messing with me. David remained unshaken, his tone as composed as ever. You're welcome to try, Jake, David said coldly. But mark my words, you'll suffer for every step you've taken. The bets are made, gentlemen. His voice turned icy as he finished. Goodbye, Jake. I have nothing more to say to you. The call ended abruptly before Jake could throw another insult. Jake slammed the phone down on his desk, muttering curses under his breath. That smug little bastard, he growled. He thinks he can play with me. But deep down, a small, nagging voice he refused to acknowledge began to stir. For the first time in a long time, Jake felt the unsettling sting of uncertainty. The first day of the divorce trial erupted in a storm of revelations. David and his lawyer presented a mountain of evidence, photographs, messages, and detailed accounts of Barbara's secret meetings with Jake. Each piece painted a vivid picture of their betrayal. Barbara's lawyer, a sharp-tongued man with a knack for stalling, objected to the immediate admission of the evidence. Your Honor, he said smoothly, these materials require thorough verification. Until their authenticity can be confirmed, we cannot allow them to unfairly influence the court's proceedings. It was a clever move, buying time for Barbara and Jake. Jake smirked from the gallery, silently commending the lawyer's strategy. Time was exactly what he needed. Time to pressure David to use his connections and resources to make this whole ordeal disappear. When the hearing ended, the judge adjourned the case until the next session. Barbara looked visibly shaken, but Jake reassured her with his usual bravado. "Don't worry, babe, we've got this. Just give me a few more days, and I'll make sure David wishes he'd never messed with us." As Jake wrapped up calls to friends who could help him corner David, his phone buzzed. The name on the screen made his stomach drop. "Boss?" "Jake," the boss said curtly when he answered. "I need you in my office."
Now.
The line went dead before Jake could respond. Something about the tone of the call suggested trouble. Trouble Jake might not be able to charm his way out of. Jake entered the boss's office, his usual confidence diminished but not entirely gone. The boss, a sharp man who rarely minced words, gestured for Jake to sit. "Jake," the boss began, his tone cold. "Frankly, just for that murky story with Barbara, I should have fired both of you. But I turned a blind eye, believing your explanation, until now." Jake immediately launched into a defense. "Sir, I'm her boss. I couldn't abandon her while her husband's clearly unhinged. There are court hearings coming up, and once that's sorted, everything will calm down." The boss frowned, tapping his fingers on the desk. "We're not here to talk about your personal drama, Jake. I've received some very disturbing information." Jake stiffened, his stomach tightening. "What kind of information?" The boss leaned back, his gaze unwavering. "It seems you've been involved in fraud, mismanaging the company's advertising budget, funneling money into shell companies, and pocketing the difference. The details are extensive." Jake's mouth went dry. "That's ridiculous. I'd never." The boss raised a hand to silence him and pressed a button on his desk phone. Moments later, the head of security walked in, followed by another man in a sharp suit. "This is a friend of mine," the boss said, gesturing to the man. "He works in the department for investigating financial and economic crimes. For now, this investigation will remain unofficial, but we're going to verify everything that's come to light. If it's true, Jake, you're looking at massive fines and possibly a criminal case." Jake stammered, his confidence cracking. "I don't know where this is coming from. Someone's trying to ruin me." The boss tilted his head, scrutinizing him. "By the way, Jake, do you play poker?" Jake froze, the question catching him off guard. No. I mean, not really. Just occasionally for fun." The boss slid a folder across the desk, opening it to reveal photographs. They showed Jake sitting at a poker table in dingy backrooms, surrounded by unsavory characters. "People say you sometimes win, sometimes lose big." Jake's face turned pale as he struggled to form a coherent response. This isn't what it looks like. It's just, I wasn't.
It's harmless."
The boss's expression remained icy. "Harmless, Jake? You've put this company's reputation on the line. From this moment forward, you're under scrutiny. Every move you make, every decision. It's all being monitored." Jake left the office under the watchful eye of a security guard, his mind racing. Back in his own office, he collapsed into his chair, clutching his head in despair. His phone buzzed, and he glanced at the screen. A message from David. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Confidence." Jake slammed the phone down on his desk, frustration boiling over. Moments later, it buzzed again. This time a call from Barbara. "Jake," she began, her voice filled with worry. "Can we meet for dinner and discuss an action plan? We need to figure out what to do, Jake." Barbara's voice trembled, desperation in her tone. Jake, his patience at its breaking point, snapped back. "I'm not going to solve other people's problems, Barbara. Figure it out yourself. Why the hell did you even drag me into this mess?" "Jake, please," she pleaded, but he cut her off, his voice cold. "I have more important things to deal with.
Bye."
Without hesitation, he hung up and blocked her number. Barbara sat on the edge of her bed, her face buried in her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. The weight of her decisions crushed her. She had lost everything. David, Jake, and even the life she had once taken for granted. Just days after Jake's betrayal, Barbara received devastating news. She was being fired. Her boss cited the public scandal, explaining that the company couldn't afford the damage her drama had caused to its reputation. On the same day, she learned that Jake was under investigation for financial fraud at work. Her divorce case concluded swiftly and brutally, with David's overwhelming evidence ensuring she received nothing. No assets, No financial support, only the legal fees for her own lawyer. Desperate, Barbara had to take out a loan to cover her debts. Eventually, she secured a new job, but it was a far cry from her previous position. Her salary was modest, and her responsibilities tedious. Every day, she was reminded of how far she had fallen, and every night, she cried herself to sleep. Jake, once brimming with confidence and charm, now sat in his small, disheveled apartment. His lawyer had warned him that the fines for his fraud were just the beginning. Jail time was likely. He stared at the evidence David had amassed, realizing the thoroughness of the investigation. The truth was undeniable. David had uncovered not just his affair with Barbara, but also the fraudulent shell companies and embezzlement schemes Jake had orchestrated. Jake's darker side had been fully exposed, with the Betrayal investigation beginning after David's anonymous tip. His rage toward David burned hot, but there was nothing he could do. David had outplayed him, and Jake knew it. Meanwhile, David sat in the quiet comfort of his parents' ranch, his heart lighter than it had been in months. He thought back to William, the private detective he had hired. The man had been worth every penny, collecting overwhelming evidence not only against Barbara but also Jake. It had been an expensive endeavor, but for David, honor and dignity were priceless. Now free from the weight of betrayal, he focused on what truly mattered: family and rebuilding his life. He had no need to gloat or seek further revenge. He had already won. As he watched the sun set over the horizon, David felt a sense of peace. He was ready to leave the past behind and start anew. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
It seemed like any other day, or so I thought. I'd stuck to my routine for weeks, trying to ignore the strange feeling that something was off. Rachel had been distant for a while, but I convinced myself it was just work stress. We'd built a life together, and I never thought anything could come between us. But looking back, the signs had been there, small things that only made sense in hindsight. I spent my days lost in thought, driving from place to place, doing errands, going through the motions of daily life. That day was no different, until a simple, unexpected event at a stoplight threw everything into chaos. I was already feeling a bit worn out, but nothing could have prepared me for what was about to happen. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time never leads to anything good. I couldn't control it, though. I was waiting at a red light when a car pulled up next to me. The driver motioned for me to roll down my window. "You've got a flat tire," he said. Grateful for the warning, I turned into the Walmart parking lot nearby to check. Sure enough, a screw had punctured the tire, causing a slow but steady leak. Perfect. Now I had to figure out my next move. I decided to head home and buy a jar of that slime. When I returned, I pulled the screw out. Big mistake. Air started hissing out. I screwed it back in and filled up the tire at the gas station in the parking lot. I was only 15 miles from home and kept checking it. If the air got too low, I'd use the slime. About 5 miles from home, I noticed in the side mirror that the tire was getting low. I pulled into a store, but there was no air. It was time to check the slime. I put it in, and green slime oozed out. I guess they call it slime for a reason, but the air stopped hissing. As I was about to get back in the car, a pickup truck pulled up. It was one of those massive ones with huge tires, sitting so high you'd need a ladder to get in. I recognized it. The door opened, and a tall guy with blonde hair, cowboy boots, and a giant belt buckle stepped out. I chuckled to myself, but it didn't last. The passenger door opened, and a beautiful woman with raven hair got out. I definitely knew her. It was Rachel, the woman I'd been married to for 18 years. What the hell? I parked off to the side, and they didn't even notice my car. It was a company car, a small, boxy import, not too noticeable. They walked into the store holding hands, and she was laughing. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I couldn't breathe or move. All I could do was stand there like an idiot. Now I remembered where I'd seen this guy before. He worked at the same company as Rachel. She was the office manager at a mental health clinic, and he worked in customer service. I'd seen his truck outside their building. The question was, what was Rachel doing with him? I couldn't remember his name at first, but then it hit me. Jerry Garner. The question now was, why wasn't Rachel at work? I was going to find out. I went back to my car and waited. When they came out of the store carrying coffee cups, he helped her into the truck. They sped off, and I followed at a safe distance. They pulled up to our house, and he drove into the garage. The door closed behind them, and I couldn't see anything else. I sat there for about 30 minutes, but the tire kept nagging at me. I checked it, but if it was low, I couldn't tell. 2 hours later, they left, and as they passed me, I held up a file folder to hide my face. Not that they would have noticed. They were too wrapped up in each other. Rachel didn't leave work until 5, and now it was only 2:30. I had time. First, I had to go inside and see what I could find. At 4, I needed to pick up Toby, and I had no idea what I was going to tell her. Toby was my 15-year-old daughter. I couldn't imagine what I'd find inside, but maybe I'd get some answers. When I entered the house, it was quiet. The only sound was the drip of the faucet I still needed to fix in Toby's bathroom, and the whisper of air from the vents. I looked around but didn't see anything unusual. I checked upstairs. The bed had fresh sheets. My heart sank. I pressed my back against the wall and slid to the floor, feeling numb. There seemed to be only one explanation. I sat there for about 30 minutes, my mind spinning. I couldn't make sense of my thoughts. I felt like I'd been pilled. My stomach growled, and I got up to grab a Sprite. I was feeling hot and sweaty. So I went to the bathroom. I fumbled for a washcloth, soaked it in cold water, and wiped my face. After washing up, I felt a bit better. That's when I noticed something. The shower floor was wet. They had showered before heading back to work. I wandered back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed in a daze, the same bed my wife and her lover had just used. That thought jolted me up, and I looked around in horror. This felt like a crime scene. I had no clue what to do. Well, divorcing Rachel was a given. But beyond that, I had no idea where to start, and I still had to pick up Toby from school. What was I supposed to tell her? I stumbled out to the car, feeling like I'd been drunk for 10 days. My head throbbed, and I probably looked terrible. I wasn't in any shape to drive, but I couldn't leave Toby waiting. Suddenly, I realized she was the only person I could truly rely on. My baby was going to be all right. I had to make sure of that. As I pulled into the line of cars, I saw her standing by the school door. She walked down the sidewalk to the car, looking so beautiful it made my heart ache. Toby had her mother's dark hair and skin, almost Mediterranean, and the most striking eyes I'd ever seen. They looked dark brown like her mom's, but with streaks of gold and green. The doctor called them hazel, but I'd never seen anything quite like them. She was tall like me, with long, honey-brown legs and undeniable beauty. She tossed her backpack in the back seat and leaned in to kiss me, but froze mid-motion. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked. "Are you sick? Did something happen? Is Mommy okay? What's going on, Daddy?" Her voice was rising with worry, and I could hear the fear creeping in. I had to say something. "I'm fine, kitten," I said. "No one's hurt or sick. But I need to talk to you, Toby. Let's go to the park. I just need to hold you and talk for a minute, okay? No more questions until we get there, all right?" "Okay, Daddy, but you're scaring me," she said. "I know, kitten, but it's going to be okay," I told her, hoping it wasn't a lie. It only took 5 minutes to get to the park. I had pushed her on those swings 1,000 times. Rachel and I used to sit on the benches and watch her play. Those were happy days. Was my life going to be nothing but memories of better times? We walked to a bench and she took my hand, swinging her arms just like she used to as a little girl. We sat down and I struggled to find the right words. "Just tell me, Daddy," she said. "I can handle it." "Well, I'm not sure I can," I replied. I told her everything, what I had seen, what I had felt, and the tears streamed down my face. She held my hand the entire time, and when I was finished, she clung to me. "That doesn't sound good, Daddy," she said. "We need to go home and talk to Mom about it. It all depends on what she tells us. I know it looks bad, but we don't have the full story. We have to ask her." I kissed the top of her head, filled with pride. My baby girl was braver than I was. She tugged my hand and I stood up. "Do you want to go?" I asked her. Her eyes sparkled. She had just gotten her driver's license. A flicker of doubt crossed her face, but disappeared quickly. She drove us home carefully, and sure enough, Rachel's car was in the garage. Rachel greeted us at the door with hugs and kisses like everything was normal. Either she was an award-winning actress, or I had misunderstood everything. "How about takeout tonight?" she asked. "My treat." "I think we need to talk to you for a minute, Mom," Toby said. "Okay, everything all right, baby?" Rachel asked. "I don't know," Toby replied. "Let's find out." We went inside and I sat next to Toby on the couch. Rachel stayed in the ugly chair she insisted on buying. "What's wrong?" she asked. There wasn't a hint of concern on her face. "How was your day?" I asked. She gave me a puzzled look. "The usual," she said. "One of the company reps brought lunch from the onion basket. It was busy and I barely had a minute to myself. Why are you asking? So, you've been at the office all day? Toby asked. Of course, Rachel said. What's with the questions? What's going on? So, you weren't here at the house this afternoon with Jerry Garner? I asked. Her face turned pale. No, of course not, she said. Are you accusing me of something, Oliver? I saw you, I said. What? You didn't see anything, she stammered. What are you trying to do? He's lying, Toby. I was at work all day. You can ask Angel. No, I don't think he's lying, Mom, Toby said. I think you're lying. I'm not asking Angel. She'll lie for you. I think I'll call David Jones, your boss. He won't lie for you. What's his number? He's gone tonight, Rachel said. I'll have him call you tomorrow. What are you two doing? Trying to trick me? You think you can just come in here and trip me up? What are you accusing me of? She was trying to go on the offensive. I think you've been lying to yourself, I told her. You lied, Rachel. All three of us know it. Why did you do it? I could see her mind racing, trying to figure out what to say next. Finally, she spoke. All right, yes, I was here. That's why I didn't want to tell you. I knew you'd grill me and accuse me of something. No one accused you, Toby responded, but I am now. You tried to make it seem like Dad was lying. You twisted everything to cover your own lies. What are you lying about, Mom? Are you having an affair with that idiot? You don't even know him, Rachel snapped. Why call him an idiot? I've met him twice, Toby said. The way he looks at me makes me want to shower. But that's not the point. Are you having an affair with him? Rachel's eyes darted around like she was cornered. After a moment, she broke down. I didn't want it to turn out like this, she said, her voice shaky. I wasn't ready. Ready for what? Toby pressed. I fell in love with Jerry, she confessed, glancing at me. I'm sorry, Oliver, it just happened. We work closely and I don't know. He feels like the other half of me. We connected and I couldn't stop it. We're in love. I was going to tell you when the time was right. Once we both get divorced, we'll get married. I'm sorry. I didn't want you to find out this way. Toby, it'll be okay. You can see your dad whenever you want. Jerry has a nice house on the lake. He even has a daughter. He really likes you, Toby. He'll be so happy. Are you insane? Toby shouted. I'm not living with that idiot. He'll probably sneak into my room at night. I'll live with Dad. I won't see you anymore. How could you do this? She spun around and stormed upstairs, slamming the door. I heard the lock click. Rachel looked at me, her face pale and trembling. She'll get over it, she said quietly. Jerry's a really nice guy, Oliver. I think you'll like him. I'm sorry, but I need to be happy. Jerry makes me happy. That's all there is to it. I just stared at her, trying to process the person she had become. It felt like she had turned into someone else entirely. I wasn't going to argue. It was obvious she was lost to me. Whatever you say, Rachel, I said flatly. When are you moving out? Moving out? She asked, confused. I don't have anywhere to go, she said. Jerry's still married. We need to tell his wife first, and we both have to get divorced before we figure out what's next. No, you're moving out, I told her coldly. I'll give you 3 days. Her mouth dropped open. What are you talking about? You can't just kick me out of my own house. If anyone's leaving, it's you. You're forgetting something, I said. This is my house. I owned it before I even met you. It was paid off before we got married. It's not marital property. My name is on the deed. Yours isn't. You're moving out. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice shaky. You're just going to throw me out on the street? I don't care where you go, I said. Maybe you can find a room at the Cheating Hooker Motel, one of those places that rents by the hour. That's where you and people like you belong. Her eyes filled with tears. That hurts, Oliver, she said softly. You don't have to call me names. I didn't plan to fall in love with Jerry. It just happened. We clicked, and I realized I had to be with him. I never meant to hurt you. Oh, so you just accidentally hurt me? I said sarcastically. Like tripping and accidentally poking your eye out. My mom used to warn me about that. Now I get it. It was an accident, right? Well, that makes it all better. You don't have to be sarcastic, she said. Why can't you just accept that Jerry and I love each other? I don't know, Rachel, I replied. Maybe because this morning you told me you loved me. Now you're telling me you love him. I'm a little confused. I love you, Oliver, she said, almost pleading. I'll always love you. I'm just in love with Jerry. Oh, well, that clears it up, I said, shaking my head. You've been telling me you were in love with me every day for 18 years. I thought that's why we got married. I guess I was mistaken. Oh no, we were in love, she insisted, reaching for my hand. I pulled away. You've got 3 days, Rachel, I said. If you're not out by then, I'll have the sheriff remove you and toss your stuff on the lawn. Please, Oliver, she begged, her voice trembling. It doesn't have to end like this. We can still be friends. Jerry wants to be your friend, too. We have Toby to think about. I told you I love you. I don't want to lose you as a friend. We've been together too long for you to just throw it all away. I stared at her. All the sadness, all the grief I'd been feeling was suddenly replaced by burning anger. You're delusional, Rachel, I said, my voice low and cold. Friends with you? With that dirtbag? No. Tell him if he ever sees me, he'd better run. As for you, you're the enemy now. I'll destroy everything you have. You've got 3 days. After that, I never want to see you again. I turned and went into the bedroom, leaving her standing there speechless. That was it for me. She followed me around, still going on about staying friends while I moved her stuff into the spare bedroom. She had more clothes in the closet than I could carry, so I just tossed them onto the bed, grabbed a pile, and took them to the spare room, hanging them in the closet. She stood there for a while, talking and watching me. When she went to hang up her clothes, I took the chance to slip out and lock the bedroom door. I heard her walking down the hall, but when she tried the knob, she gave up and walked away. A few minutes later, Toby texted, "Are you okay, Dad?" "Yes, kitten," I replied. "How about you?" "No, but I will be," she answered. "Okay, love you." "Love you too. Drive me to school in the morning? I don't want to ride with her." CC. I crawled into bed and lay awake for hours trying to figure out my next steps. I must have fallen asleep around 3, but the phone alarm soon went off. I got up, took a shower, and called my boss. I told him I was getting a divorce and needed a few days off. He told me to take as much time as I needed and offered his condolences. I went downstairs, brewed some coffee, and had a couple of cups. I made breakfast for Toby and me. She came down on time, looking as beautiful as ever, and eagerly ate breakfast. After a while, Rachel came in, poured herself some coffee, and tried to talk to us, but we both ignored her. It was time to take Toby to school, and Rachel asked if she was ready. Toby just looked at her, then turned to me and asked, "Are you ready, Daddy?" I jingled my keys, and she grabbed her backpack. "Fine," Rachel said, her voice full of frustration. "Act like toddlers if that makes you feel better." She stormed off, grabbed her purse, threw us another glance, and left. I dropped Toby off at school, and she kissed me on the way out. I sat in the car for a moment, watching her walk into the building. I thought about my friend Dan, who had recently gone through a divorce. I decided to call him and ask about his lawyer. Dan didn't recommend his own lawyer. Instead, he suggested I use his wife's lawyer and gave me the name. I looked up the number, and when I called, a woman answered and put me on hold. After explaining my situation, she agreed to meet with me that afternoon, so I started taking steps. We had an investment, but there wasn't much I could do about it right away. However, I wasn't going to let her rack up huge credit card bills, so I called and lowered the limits on our cards to $500. Of course, this impacted me too, but I wasn't about to finance her affair. The meeting with Elizabeth Baxter didn't get off to a great start. She had some assumptions I had to clear up before we could even begin. She assumed I was leaving Rachel for someone else. "You've got it wrong," I told her. "Rachel is having an affair with a coworker. He's married, and they're both planning to divorce and marry each other." "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't represent people who leave for someone else. I can't live with myself if I do." "I get it," I replied. "We have a daughter. I want to minimize the damage. Do you think I could get custody of her?" "It's possible," she said. "In theory, custody can go to either parent, but in practice, it's harder for fathers, especially with daughters. How old is she? And does she want to stay with you?" "She's 15, and yes, she wants to stay with me," I answered. "That's a big plus," she said. "In this state, children over 14 can choose which parent to live with, and their wishes are heavily considered. If she were younger, your chances would be slim. But since she's 15 and wants to stay with you, that will work in your favor for the custody agreement." "Just do your best," I told her. As I drove home, I kept wondering what my next steps should be. I knew I had to do something, but it had to be legal. Getting arrested would mean losing Toby, and that was not an option. I needed a plan. Burning down houses? Well, you have to make sure it's not your own. This was going to take careful thought. I suspected Jerry's wife was as clueless as I had been, so the first step would be letting her know. I needed to make a list. First, I'd inform Rachel's parents. They loved me and adored Toby, so they should hear the truth first. But how would I go about that? Letting our friends know was also a priority. I figured I could stir up quite a storm on social media. That was the first thing on my list. She had a Facebook account for our family, so I played around with it, used Messenger, and pieced things together. I searched online and found that Jerry's wife had done the same digging. I took screenshots of a few pictures and posted on Rachel's page, announcing that we were getting divorced and that she had found her soulmate in Jerry, even including his picture. I changed my password and logged out. It felt satisfying. I wondered how long it would take before her friends and family bombarded her phone and Facebook page. I hoped Jerry's wife would understand what was happening. I didn't know her, and I felt bad for the chaos this would bring into her life. But if she was like me, she deserved to know the truth. I called my mom, and the conversation went about as poorly as I expected. After the initial shock, she just said she'd tell Dad and that they were there for me if I needed anything. I figured I'd let Rachel break the news to her parents herself. We were close, and I didn't want to be the reason for any estrangement. Besides, I wasn't sure how to tell them anyway. Somehow, "Your daughter is a cheating strumpet," didn't feel like the right message. They'd probably shoot the messenger. It didn't take long for everything to unravel. Around 2 p.m, Rachel's name popped up on my phone. I answered, and she was livid. "You a hole!" Her rage gave me a bit of satisfaction. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? I know you blocked me on Facebook. Take that crap down. Jerry's wife doesn't know yet. My friends are blowing up my phone asking what's going on. My parents know. I'm telling you, Oliver, clean this up." "No, Rachel, you don't get to boss me around," I replied. "What are you, 5 years old? Take it down, Oliver. I'm serious." "You should be happy," I said. "Now everyone knows about you and your soulmate. Are you ashamed people know you're a cheating strumpet?" "I don't," she began, but then stopped, realizing how absurd her denial would sound. "Oliver, please take it down. It wasn't supposed to go like this." "You gave up control when you cheated, Rachel. You lost any right to my respect or courtesy. I told you, you're the enemy now. Deal with it." I hung up. When the phone buzzed again, I ignored it. It was time to pick up Toby. When I told her about my conversation with Elizabeth Baxter, she was happy to hear she'd likely stay with me, but overall, she wasn't pleased. "What's wrong with Mom, Dad?" she asked. "You know I love her, but she's always been a bit immature. I've always felt like I had 2 kids. Her and you. Didn't you ever notice that?" "Not really, but now that you mention it, yeah. She's impulsive, but I never thought she'd do something like this." "Well, we'll figure it out," she said. "Dad, I don't ever want to be in the same house with that guy unless you're there. I don't care what you have to do, just make sure it doesn't happen, okay?" "I promise," I said. We picked up pizza on the way home, and I was enjoying my second slice when my phone buzzed. It was Bob, Rachel's dad. I wasn't expecting the call. I told Toby, and she said to put it on speaker. Bob got straight to the point. "Oliver, I don't know what's going on, but Rachel came over last night asking to stay with us." "Care to explain why?" Bob asked. "Did you ask her?" I replied. "She said you kicked her out," Bob answered. "Well, yeah, but," I began. "Did she tell you why?" Bob interrupted. "No, she said she'd explain later but wasn't ready yet," Bob said. "Don't you want to wait for her explanation?" I asked. "Can't you just tell me?" Bob pressed. "She's been having an affair with Jerry Garner, a guy from her work. They're both planning to divorce and get married," I explained. "What? That's insane, Oliver. How do you know that?" Bob asked, shocked. "I caught them together yesterday," I said. "And she admitted it." "Are you sure you didn't misunderstand?" Bob questioned. Toby suddenly chimed in. "Hey, Grandpa, I'm on speaker. There's no misunderstanding. I was there when she told Dad. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, I love you." Her voice broke as she started crying. Bob's voice cracked when he responded, "Don't cry, sweetheart. Please be strong. We love you, and Grandma does too. I'll try to talk some sense into your mom. Oliver, are you still there?" "Yeah. I'm really sorry, Bob, but don't worry about Toby. You'll always be her grandparents. That won't change. I know you love Rachel, and you'll do what you need to do. I have a lot of respect for you. I just hope you don't end up hating me when this is all over," I said, trying to reassure him. "That's never going to happen," Bob said firmly. "I'll figure out what's going on. Call me if you need anything." It went better than I'd feared. Life happens, and you just do your best. I won't go into detail about the divorce process. Most people know how it goes. It was long, painful, and never got easier. Rachel was delusional. thinking she'd get custody of Toby. That didn't happen. Miss Baxter was as good as her reputation. I got full custody because Toby wanted to live with me. After a private meeting with Toby, the judge ruled that Rachel would get unlimited visitation, but Toby wouldn't be left alone with her and Jerry Garner. In any case, it didn't matter anymore. His wife divorced him, but it seemed the whole soulmate thing was more of an exaggeration, at least on his part. Just 2 weeks after I discovered the affair, Jerry was already looking for his next conquest. All their grand plans disappeared like fog on a sunny day. The divorce took 7 months to finalize. Surprisingly, Rachel changed her mind. During the second court hearing, she asked the judge to schedule counseling. Neither Miss Baxter nor I had anything to say, and the judge ordered it. We were assigned 8 to 10 sessions. Our counselors were an odd pair of old hippies. In the first session, they asked us to state our goals. Rachel's goals were long and complicated. She seemed to believe I should understand that her happiness was the universe's main purpose, and that she desired only good things. My goal was much simpler. "What's your purpose for these sessions, Mr. Berryman?" the counselor asked. "My goal is to finish them," I said. The counselor frowned. "Mr. Berryman, do you really not want to address the issues that led your marriage to this point?" "I'm sorry, Mr. Rodman, but it wasn't my issues that caused this. I have no interest in working on them. I'm perfectly fine with my problems and plan to die with them." Rachel and Mr. Rodman were both horrified. Rachel spoke up quickly. "Oliver, how do you expect things to get back to normal if you won't even talk about it?" "I don't want to," I said. "Let me make this clear to both of you. I'm not here to fix anything or work on any problems. I'm here because the court ordered it. I'll do what I need to do, then we'll go back to court and finalize the divorce. That's my plan." "Do you realize if I report to the judge that you're refusing to cooperate, you could be held in contempt of court?" Mr. Rodman said. "I don't know about that," I replied. "You mean if you lie to the judge? These sessions are recorded. I'm sure my lawyer would love to subpoena you for perjury. I'm here. I'm doing what you ask. You asked for my goals, and I gave them. I'm cooperating." He blushed. "The judge likely expected you to work through your issues." "I'm not responsible for the judge's expectations," I said. "Only for my own." He tried to make it difficult by assigning tasks that required me to spend more time with Rachel, and she worked hard to wear me down. "Oliver, what would it take for you to give up the divorce and work things out?" she asked. "An act of God," I said. She waited for an explanation, but I said nothing. "What do you mean by an act of God?" she finally asked. "Well, if you can turn back time and avoid getting involved with Jerry, that would work. Otherwise, only God has that kind of power. Do you have some divine powers I don't know about, Rachel, besides your ability to attract other men?" We continued with the boring exercises and mantras, and finally it was over. Back in court, the judge asked if we had made any progress. "Your Honor, there is no chance my client will remain married to his wife," Elizabeth Baxter said. "We'd like to finalize the divorce as soon as possible. This process has gone on long enough." The judge must have agreed because the final order arrived in the mail 10 days later. Toby saw her mother often since she spent a lot of time with her grandparents. Occasionally, Rachel would plan something for the two of them, but their relationship was never the same. Toby spent most of her time with her friends, especially a petite blonde named Sabrina, who was practically part of our family. Sabrina was as sweet as she was cute, and I enjoyed having her around. They even started including me in their activities. One of their favorite activities was water skiing. We had a boat, and once summer vacation started, we'd go to a nearby lake on Saturdays. One Monday, they asked if we could spend the whole weekend at the lake, take the RV, and stay until Sunday evening. Since my schedule was free, I agreed. The girls spent the week planning, and by Thursday, we packed everything they wanted. On Friday afternoon, a new red Jeep Cherokee pulled into the driveway, and Sabrina jumped out. An almost identical woman stepped out from the driver's side, and Toby rushed to hug her. Sabrina and Toby led the nervous-looking woman over to me. "Dad," Toby said, "this is Julie. She's Sabrina's mom. I know you haven't met her yet." Julie extended her hand. "Hi, Oliver. The girls have told me so much about you. Thanks for inviting me along this weekend. Honestly, I was getting a little jealous that they were spending so much time with you and not me." She smiled playfully, and I instantly understood why Sabrina was such a charming little minx. I glanced at Toby, and she gave me a fierce look. My knees felt weak, and I knew when to surrender. The trembling got worse when I looked at Sabrina, who raised an eyebrow at me. "This is going to be great," I said to Julie, pulling myself together. "We always have a good time." Julie wasn't oblivious. She shifted her gaze from me to the girls, then back to me. "Oh my God, she said, realizing what was happening. You didn't know, did you? The girls? Before she could say anything else, she was engulfed in hugs, kisses, and pleas from Toby and Sabrina. Please, Mom, don't worry about it. We're going to have so much fun, Sabrina said. It's okay, Julie. Daddy's going to love you as much as I do, and he's a great guy, Toby added with a mischievous grin. Julie disentangled herself from the girls and gave me an apologetic look. You two go sit on the porch. I need to talk to Oliver, she said, her tone firm but kind. The girls giggled as they obeyed, heading to the porch. I'm so sorry, Oliver, Julie said, her face flushing red. I had no idea they were trying to set us up. I'll take Sabrina home. She'll be grounded for a month. This is so embarrassing. She looked so small and mortified that I stepped forward and hugged her. She tensed at first, but then relaxed into the embrace. Yeah, it's embarrassing, I admitted. But they're just kids. We both know they're trying to look out for us. Let me guess. You're single? She laughed softly and looked up at me with her big brown eyes. Yes, I am. Well, that's the point, right? You're packed, you've got the weekend free, and the lake will be amazing. I'm not a bad guy, as you've probably heard from Toby. Let's just go along with the girls' little plan. It'll be fun, and we can mess with them a bit too. What do you say? She hesitated for a second, glanced at the girls' eager faces, then smiled. Okay, let's go. I gave the girls a thumbs up, and they cheered, running toward us. I stopped them before they got too excited, grabbing each by the arm. Girls, that wasn't very nice, I said, trying to keep a straight face. Sabrina growled in her best Skeletor voice. I am not cute. We all burst out laughing and the tension broke. They were too sweet to stay mad at. We know what you're up to, I said. Stop it. Seriously, you can't just mess with people's lives like that. Yeah, but I love Jules, and I didn't know how to introduce you to her, Toby said, pouting. Well, you could have just told me, I said. She looked a little sad, so I softened. It's okay, kitten. Just don't do it again, all right? She brightened up immediately, and Sabrina tugged on my hand. Let's go. I can't wait. It's going to be disgusting, Oliver. You'll see. Julie laughed, a sound that lightened the mood. Sounds like it's going to be awesome, Ollie, she teased. But Sab's right. We're burning daylight. We loaded the bags into the Jeep and set off. After securing the boat and picking up propane, we hit the road. It was only about a half-hour drive to the lake. Julie sat up front with me while the girls sat in the back, playing awful music through their Bluetooth speakers. As we drove, Julie and I got to know each other better. It turned out she owned an insurance company and worked as a financial planner. I couldn't help but glance at her now and then. She was cute, petite, with light blonde hair that cascaded down to her waist. She looked younger than me, though she was only 3 years younger. Her large brown eyes, high cheekbones, and heart-shaped face made her look even more youthful. She was slender, dressed in jeans and a button-up top, with a tan that hinted at outdoor adventures. I wondered if Sabrina would look like her mom when she grew up. When we arrived at the lake, I set up the boat while the girls changed into their swimsuits. Julie came out last, and I nearly dropped what I was holding. She was stunning, slender but curvy in all the right places, with the same confident energy as her daughter, but with a maturity that made her even more attractive. She caught me staring and gave me a playful wink. Done? She asked, sparing me the awkwardness with a smile. For now, I replied, laughing. You know what you look like, Julie. I'm only human. We spent the next few hours water skiing. Julie turned out to be incredible at it, even steering the boat like a pro while I took my turn skiing. I wasn't as good as her or the girls, but I held my own. After skiing, we headed back to camp where the girls wanted to cook outside. We built a fire, grilled hot dogs, fried potatoes and onions, and opened a can of pork and beans. Camp food always tasted better, and the evening was perfect. We sat around the picnic table, talking as if we'd known each other for years. Julie, now Jules, as the girls called her, fit right in. She started calling me Ollie, and the girls kept dropping hints that Jules was single. Finally, I asked, So why hasn't some guy snatched you up yet, Jules? You're gorgeous, funny, smart, and you've got your own business. For a moment, she was quiet. Then she took a deep breath. Well, the main reason is Sabrina, she said. I was young and foolish, Ollie. I was in college and thought I'd found the love of my life. A week before graduation, I found out I was pregnant. I wasn't too upset because we had talked about getting married, but 3 days after I told Brad, I learned he'd been cheating on me. I dumped him and never looked back. When Sab was born, I didn't have time for a social life. By the time I could think about dating again, I realized I had this amazing gift. and I couldn't do anything without considering her. I get it, I said. I feel the same way about Toby. She's everything to me, especially over the past 18 months. She's kept me grounded. Julie placed her hand on mine. I know, she said softly. She tells Sab and me everything. I'm really sorry, Ollie. Yeah, I sighed. Life can be tough sometimes. We both sat in comfortable silence, looking up to see two pairs of approving eyes watching us from under the canopy. Toby and Sabrina were whispering and giggling, clearly pleased with themselves. I love your daughter, I told Julie. She feels like part of my family with how much time she spends here. She loves you too, Julie said, her voice catching. She told me the other day that you're like the father she never had. Her big brown eyes grew teary, and a tear slid down her cheek. I gently wiped it away with my finger. She's a great girl, I said, and her mom is an incredible woman for raising her so well, especially on her own. Julie smiled, then stood up and kissed me on the cheek before heading back to the girls. We had a wonderful weekend, and when it was time for them to leave, I walked Julie to her car. Just before she got in, I tapped on her window. Jules, would you be interested in going out with me next Friday? I asked, feeling a bit nervous. Sabrina squealed from inside the car, and Julie smiled brightly. What time? She asked. 6, I suggested. We'll have dinner and find something fun to do. Sounds great, she said, leaning in to kiss my cheek before driving off. When I got home, Toby was waiting for me. Did you ask her out? Did you kiss her? She asked, grinning. I wrapped my arms around her and gave her a playful pat. That's for me to know, and none of your business, she squealed, and I heard Sabrina's echo from the car. I knew it. She's perfect for you, Daddy. I love her so much, and Sabs is like a sister to me. I shrugged. What happens, happens, Toby. You can't force it. Stop trying to be a matchmaker. She snuggled up against me. I know, Daddy, but if I didn't do something, you'd never make a move. Not that I didn't like being the only girl in your life. I laughed. You'll always have a special place in my heart that no one can take. You're my baby, and that'll never change. She purred contentedly, snuggled against me for a moment, and then went off to handle her own business. Our first date went well. I invited her to play racquetball. She was new to it, but she had played tennis before, so the mechanics were similar. Once she got the hang of the rules and hitting the ball off the walls, she did great. It didn't hurt that she was a natural athlete, fast and quick to change direction, which her petite size helped with. After our game, we sat down near the court, relaxed, and had a drink. Julie grabbed her phone. Let's take a picture for the kids, she said. We posed with our rackets and goggles, snapped the photo, and sent it to them. They responded immediately, and it became a nice memory. Afterward, we both showered, and I took her out to dinner. We found a great Italian place and stuffed ourselves. Sitting in the booth, finishing our wine, Jules leaned into me, and it felt natural to put my arm around her. She nestled closer, smiling, and I realized how sweet she truly was, a quality that wouldn't fade with time. When we pulled up to her house, she leaned toward me expectantly. I realized she wanted me to kiss her, so I did. I wanted it as much as she did, maybe more. The kiss was long and wonderful. Her lips were soft and sweet, tasting of wine and cherry chapstick. As we pulled apart, I noticed the drapes moving. I think we've got an audience, I said. She giggled, sounding just like her daughter. Or maybe her daughter was like her. I'm not surprised. You know they're trying to set us up, right? Is that okay with you? I asked. She blushed. Yes. I like everything I've learned about you, Ollie. Same here, I said. We'd better go inside before they tear the curtains down. We met every Friday for 4 months, getting closer and closer, and I wanted our relationship to grow. I didn't want to pressure her, but some of our dates were getting pretty heated toward the end. At the same time, I found that I enjoyed her friendship almost as much as I liked having her as my girlfriend. We were constantly chatting on the phone, texting funny things, or just a few words throughout the day. If I saw or heard something I knew would make Jules laugh, I had to share it with her. We became very close, knowing everything about each other's lives. We started having dinner together every Tuesday, all of us, playing games and just hanging out. And I was growing as fond of Sabrina as I was of her mom. They were so alike, if you knew one, you pretty much knew the other. The differences were small, but only emphasized how similar they really were. Both were utterly adorable. Life was great, except for Rachel's constant presence. She was still part of Toby's life, which meant she was still part of mine. I wanted nothing to do with her, and seeing her irritated me. Every time she came to pick up Toby or when I dropped her off at her grandparents', Rachel would try to talk to me. She was still living with them, along with Jerry. She had lost her job at the clinic and was now working at another clinic across town. If she annoyed me too much, I'd ask if she'd heard from Jerry, which shut her up quickly. "How long is it going to take for you to forgive me?" she asked one time. "Forgive you for what?" I replied. "As far as I know, you don't think you've done anything wrong. I've never heard—" "Forgive me, Oliver, I was wrong. I'm sorry for trying to make Toby think you were a liar. I'm sorry for trying to take her away from you, for trying to screw you in the divorce. And most of all, I've never heard. I'm sorry I cheated behind your back." I didn't hear it that time either. She just couldn't take responsibility for her actions. I wasn't even sure what forgiveness would mean in this situation. I'd come to terms with it and calmed down. I hadn't forgotten, but I wasn't going to waste energy being bitter. People have the right to make mistakes. They can divorce you, dump you, end friendships. It's their choice. You just accept it and move forward. People do crappy things every day. At one point, I wanted to punish her and Jerry, but I realized quickly that their punishment was simply being who they were. They had to live with themselves, while I planned to live with myself. That meant leaving the lies and betrayal in the past and focusing on living my best life. Rachel was miserable, and as for Jerry, I wished him all the misfortune in the world, but it wouldn't come from me. I'd let karma or the universe take care of them. Rachel got even more upset when she found out I was dating Jules. One time, after I dropped Toby off at her grandparents' house, Rachel stopped me as I was getting into my car. "I heard you're dating the mother of one of Toby's friends," she said. I just stared at her. "Is it true?" she pressed. "That's none of your business," I told her. "Like hell it isn't," she snapped. "I'm your wife. I have a right to know." "You have a right to nothing," I replied. "You're not my wife anymore. You found your soulmate, remember? And it wasn't me. Then came the divorce. My business isn't yours anymore, and yours isn't mine. Stay out of it, Rachel." I left fuming. That woman just couldn't leave things alone. I told Toby what had happened, and she was just as angry as I was. From then on, I arranged for her grandparents, Bob or Cindy, to pick her up. That took away a major source of stress for me. On the 7-month anniversary of our lake trip, I asked Jules out for a special date. We went to a nice restaurant and then to a club. She didn't drink much, usually just a beer or a single drink, but that night, she had 2. I raised an eyebrow when she ordered the second one, and she laughed. "Yeah, I'm feeling wild and crazy today, huh?" "You're perfect, just like always," I told her. "Do you really think so, Ollie?" she asked, tilting her head. "Because I think you're pretty perfect, too." "If I'm so perfect, why haven't you asked me to spend the night?" she teased. I must have looked shocked because she laughed. "What? Didn't you even think about it?" I gathered my thoughts. Yeah, Jules. I've been thinking about it since the first day I saw you on the boat in that bikini. But as we started dating, I realized you were special, and I didn't want to push you or scare you off." "You won't scare me off," she said. "I told the girls not to wait up." "Really? Then what are we still doing here?" I asked, excited. "Oh my God, Jules, let's get out of here. Do you want to spend the night with me?" She blushed, took my hand, and let me help her up. More than anything else in the world right now. She practically cuddled up to me as we got out of the car, holding onto my arm the whole way home with her head resting on my shoulder. When we pulled into the garage, I let her out, and she stayed close to my side all the way to the bedroom. We fell asleep in each other's arms, making love twice during the night, once on my initiative, once on hers. I woke up the next morning on my back with her half lying on top of me, her hair spread over both of us, and her cheek resting on my shoulder. I gently played with her hair, watching her sleep until she finally opened her eyes. "My place is here, Ollie." "I know," I replied. "Would you like to wake up here every morning?" she asked, looking at me. "You mean living together?" "No, honey, well, yes, but what I mean is, will you marry me, Julie Barnes?" She raised her small left hand between us, wiggling her fingers. "Ooh," she said. "Something seems to be missing." "Hold that thought," I said, starting to get out of bed. "I'll hold that thought," she replied. "But I can't hold anything else. I need to pee so badly." I laughed. "Go ahead. I'll meet you back here." She scurried off, and I went down to my office, remembering to use the bathroom along the way. I grabbed what I needed from the safe and returned to find her curled up under the blanket. I climbed back into bed, took her left hand again, and looked into her eyes, seeing only love. "Okay, Julie, "Will you marry me?" I asked, sliding the ring onto her finger. It was a bit too big and would need to be resized, but for the moment, it was perfect. She took the ring, examined it, and smiled. "It's beautiful," she said. "It looks antique. Where did you get it? When did you buy it?" "Remember when I told you I was going to that auction about a month ago?" I asked. "Yes, I remember. They were auctioning off the estate, right?" "Exactly. I didn't mention it at the time, but I saw this ring in the catalog. I went there specifically to buy it and ask you to marry me. It was made in England around 1810 for the Duchess of Avon. It has a long history. Do you like it?" "I love it," she said. "It's the most beautiful ring I've ever seen." "So, are you going to answer my question?" I asked with a smile. "What?" "Oh, yes, Oliver. Yes, I'll marry you." "Oh my God, yes." I laughed and pulled her into a tight hug. It felt like a weight had finally been lifted. The long road I had walked, filled with anger, betrayal, and loss, was finally behind me. Rachel was out of my life, and though the scars would always remain, I had moved forward. I had found someone who brought joy, laughter, and meaning back into my days. Jules was my partner in every sense of the word, and together we were building a future, one filled with warmth and love. As we started planning our wedding, life felt lighter. Toby was thriving, Sabrina was like a second daughter to me, and Jules made me believe in happiness again. It wasn't just about finding love, but rediscovering a part of myself that had been buried under years of resentment and disappointment. The lake trips became a regular part of our lives, and every time we went, I found myself more at peace. The laughter, the quiet moments, the family we had formed, they were all reminders that life, no matter how painful it might seem at times, always had the potential to offer something beautiful on the other side. Rachel had her life, and I had mine. For the first time in a long time, I could say with certainty, I was happy. Truly happy. The darkness had passed, and now, in its place, was a life I wanted to live. A life I chose, with the people who mattered most. And that was enough.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I saw the baby and I was shocked. It was not my race. My heart sank. Today we bring the story of a man who discovers that his wife cheated on him when her baby is born. Let's get on with the story. When my wife was 6 months pregnant, we were thrilled to learn that we were expecting a boy. We celebrated with a baby shower and made all the necessary preparations for our expanding family. With a 5-year-old son already, we thought we could reuse some of his things. When the day of labor arrived, I stood by my wife's side, no stranger to the birthing process, having been through it 5 years ago. Looking back, as our firstborn grew older, I started having doubts about whether he was truly mine. Despite having doubts, I was overjoyed when he was born, as I had married my best friend. At 29, I am happily married to my 27-year-old wife. We quickly became best friends after meeting at a park and had been together for 5 years. Our son was conceived shortly after we became intimate, so suspicions of infidelity didn't cross my mind. However, as our son grew, I couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't look like me at all. The differences became more apparent, and I found myself questioning his paternity. His features seemed vastly different from what I expected a child of mine to look like. I have nieces and nephews, and my wife has her own, but our son didn't resemble anyone on my side of the family. What added to my concerns was my wife's behavior. There were inconsistencies in her schedule, and she often went out without a clear explanation of where she was going. One incident stood out when she claimed to be visiting a friend in the hospital, causing me to leave work early to relieve the babysitter. However, I later discovered through social media that the friend was on vacation at the time. In that intense moment in the delivery room, as my wife was going through the pain of labor, I found myself standing by her side, holding her hand tightly. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, and I could feel the weight of the impending delivery. This was supposed to be the moment we welcomed our second biological son into the world, a fresh start for us. As the medical team guided her through the stages of labor, coaching her on breathing techniques and providing support, I was there offering words of encouragement. I remember every second vividly, as the contraction intensified and the medical team prepared for the final stage of delivery. The cry of the baby pierced through the room before I laid eyes on him. However, when I finally saw him, a sense of confusion washed over me. Something didn't seem right. It was as if he looked like a mixed-race baby. Oddly, all the medical staff, except for the doctor, acted like everything was normal. The doctor, though, gave me a look that cut through the tension, almost as if he was confirming my own racial identity before recomposing himself. This unexpected twist added another layer of complexity to the doubts that had been lingering in my mind. It's a moment that marked the most traumatic experience of my life, surpassing even the birth of our firstborn. As I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss, and the look from the doctor only deepened my sense of unease. The glaringly obvious difference in the baby's race hit me like a ton of bricks. Frozen in disbelief, I stood there as everyone around us acted like it was a perfectly normal occurrence. The grip of my wife's fingers around my palm grew tighter, and I felt my world closing in. It wasn't until after the medical team left the room that I regained control of myself. The need to confront her was overwhelming, but she was too tired and sleepy from the ordeal. I walked out of the hospital, refusing to help her and avoiding any involvement, leaving her family to assist her and the baby back home. I couldn't bear to be around, let alone sign the birth certificate. The side of the family that perceives me as a terrible person doesn't know the truth, that she was the one who cheated. Shortly after, I decided to do a DNA test on my 5-year-old son. The day I received the results marked the day I filed for separation from what had become a sham of a marriage. I served her divorce papers while she was still recovering from childbirth. My mom and sister were there, having helped her out of the hospital, and they turned combative when I served her the divorce papers. They called me a deadbeat and an irresponsible father, following me around the house, attempting to provoke a violent reaction. I knew their game, to incite violence so they could use it against me in the divorce process. Up until that point, I had been a devoted father to her son, loving him with all my heart. But now, seeing him fills me with disdain. Disdain for the 5 years I wasted, and disdain for not trusting my instincts. Now, I'm left with virtually nothing. People call me a monster for leaving my son, but they don't know the whole story. I packed a few clothes and stayed at an extended stay hotel, biding my time until I found an apartment. I left everything, even my furniture, behind with her. Moreover, she contributed some of it, but I'd rather she have it all. I don't want anything from my old life that might remind me of her. Even when I was at the hotel, and she didn't know where I was, she tried multiple times to guilt me into coming back. She went to the extent of having our 5-year-old call me at random hours of the night, crying and begging for his daddy to come back home. It was a manipulative tactic to torture me further, as if she hadn't done enough. She constantly told me how much damage I was doing to the family. In every conversation, whether online or offline, where our son was brought up, I was berated and shamed. Despite not being the boy's biological father, I am his dad. It's a painful reality that despite my commitment and love for him, the continuous betrayal and infidelity overshadowed everything. Throughout our marriage, she cheated on me repeatedly, eroding the trust and foundation of our relationship. To make matters worse, she used our mutual friends to gang up against me. As a result, I distanced myself from most of them, as they labeled me a despicable person for abandoning the child. My parents and siblings have been a source of support, understanding the complexity of it all, especially since they've bonded with her son and babysat for us. But even their support doesn't erase the pain and confusion I'm going through. It's disheartening to realize that, for some friends and family, my feelings don't seem to matter much. They expect me to man up and continue playing a role that isn't mine, despite the fact that a DNA test has proven the child isn't biologically mine. The pressure to be a father to a child born out of my wife's betrayal is intense. It's frustrating that my feelings are being dismissed or misunderstood. I've come to the realization that, in many people's eyes, I'm supposed to put aside my pain, betrayal, and emasculation to continue being there for a child who isn't biologically mine. The accusations that I never loved him, or was always looking for a way out, only add to the emotional burden. The expectation that I should continue to be a father to a child born out of infidelity is difficult to bear. It's not realistic to expect me to maintain that role as we go through a divorce and I pursue a disestablishment of paternity. The emotional toll of being cheated on, lied to, and used by someone who hasn't been truthful about her actions is profound. I still have my own life and feelings to consider. While I love the child like my own, the idea of playing a role that isn't truly mine is becoming increasingly difficult. It's not about abandoning an innocent child, but rather about recognizing the reality of the situation and taking back control of my own life. It's crucial to make it clear that I don't harbor any resentment towards the child. He's an innocent casualty of his mother's actions, and I feel a deep sadness when I think about what he must be going through. However, every time I look at him, I can't escape the reality of the 5 years of deception and betrayal that I endured. This situation is far from easy for me, and I find it impossible to put aside my feelings of hurt and frustration to maintain a role that was built on lies. The life I thought I shared with him was nothing more than a facade created by his mother. It's a painful truth that I can no longer bear, and for the sake of both of us, I've decided to pursue a disestablishment of paternity. I find myself questioning why she isn't actively searching for his real father. She knows who he is, and it seems like a more reasonable approach than clinging to a situation that's based on deception. Instead, she's fighting the divorce and pushing for child support, making it clear that she wants to keep me entangled in a life that has already proven to be a web of lies. My lawyer has mentioned that there's a good chance of not paying child support based on similar cases in the state, but the uncertainty adds to the stress. Money is not my biggest concern here. My primary worry is that his mother will continue to use him against me. I still care for him, but it's time for me to move on and start afresh. Admitting to this colossal mistake is painful, and the time and trauma invested in this relationship are something I know I can never fully recover. But moving forward seems to be the only viable option for both of our sakes. It's indeed a complex and emotionally challenging situation that the original poster is going through. The issues around paternity fraud are sensitive and can have profound impacts on individuals and families. The legal aspects of disestablishment of paternity vary depending on jurisdiction, and it's true that some places may allow it under certain conditions even without the biological father's consent. The shift towards prioritizing the welfare of the child, often at the expense of the legal father, is a significant concern that has been discussed in various contexts. The comparison to the Titanic scene, where women and children go first, is a poignant analogy for how family courts often operate. Men can feel disposable, and the legal systems focus on holding them accountable for decisions they had no part in can be incredibly challenging. The information about paternity tests being banned in France raises questions about the balance between preserving the peace of families and the right to know one's biological parentage. It's a complex issue that involves ethical, legal, and societal considerations. The underlying point you make about the importance of choice for both partners in situations of infidelity is a valid one. Relationships are built on trust, and when that trust is broken, individuals should have the autonomy to make decisions that align with their values and well-being. Overall, this story highlights the need for open conversations and awareness around issues of paternity fraud, relationship transparency, and the rights of all individuals involved. It's a topic that requires careful consideration and compassion for everyone affected. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.